and we will rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, I'm going to give grant permission to the Westwood Media Center to record the meeting. Does anyone else want to record? Seeing no one. We're going to be hearing about our focus is on all the warrant articles, and things are changing kind of as we sit here. So the first section is going to be the select board articles, and then after that we will, Todd Corkton will then talk about the road improvement article, and then the planning board, who is not here yet, will be coming in and talking about their articles. Tonight we will entertain questions on each article from the members as they do them, and then at the end of the meeting we will have comments from the public. I guess based on that, we'll welcome Chairman Hyde and Chris Coleman, first time officially here as the town administrator, and Pam Dukeman is the assistant town administrator.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off. Thank you, everybody. We're happy to be back here tonight. We had a meeting of the select board just preceding this, and so we adjourned into this meeting. And we're here to give you an update on the articles we gave a very cursory review of a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to speak on a few, but initially I'm going to turn it over to Pam Dukeman to just give you an update on the finance budget-related articles. We aren't going into great depth tonight on any of the budget articles. We'll give a little more detail on the capital, but that deep dive even further will take place at a future meeting. But we wanted to let you know where we were in those discussions, or where we are, and then we'll get into some of the other articles that we have proposed for your consideration in this year's annual town meeting. So I'll turn it over to Pam to go through the overview of the first 13 articles, I believe.
Thank you, Nancy. There are 13 budget articles. As Nancy said, tonight is not the budget presentation. We come back at your next meeting, February 11th, and we go through the budget in great detail. You'll hear a presentation that night on the school budget, you'll hear a presentation on the municipal budget, and you'll hear an overall presentation where we talk about taxes, state aid, our revenue sources, all of that. So we'll do that at the next meeting. But we do have all of the budget articles laid out, 13 budget articles. We do at this point have a balanced budget that would be presented with these articles. So we'll just go through that, starting with Article 1 and 2. As you're aware, the first two articles each year at town meeting deal with our current year, FY20, helping us just clean up the budget for any adjustments we need to make. So Article 1 adjusts the budget by transferring from one budget to another. We typically, in about March, early to mid-March, finalize this article. We try to, get as much of the information during the year as we can, including if we need anything for snow and ice, although we don't like to talk about that. But so in early March, we'll start giving you some numbers for that. We don't have them at this point. Article 2 is similar in that we're cleaning up the current year, but here we're supplementing with additional revenue, typically free cash. So our major item in this account usually each year is snow and ice. Again, you'll see this start to have some numbers in early to mid-March. I did want to point out this year there's one additional item that we'll be handling in this article. We have it listed here in that mid-bullet. We're recommending a $350,000 transfer to the school special education reserve account. That would be a transfer from free cash. And you'll hear more about this when the school presents their budget to you. But when the school was developing their budget, they had some potential but not absolute special education cost for the FY21 year. We try not to build in kind of uncertainty into the budget and then have it kind of in the budget on a permanent basis. So in discussions with the school, since it's not a guaranteed cost, we would prefer to handle it this way. Transfer funds into that special education reserve account. You'll recall that was an account that the town set up in the fall 2017 town meeting. It's an account allowed by Department of Education and Department of Revenue to help mitigate fluctuations in special education costs. That account requires a vote by the school committee and the Board of Selectmen to use during the year. So putting this $350 into that account, we'll have the funds there if needed by the schools during the year, requires the vote of the two boards to use, but it will allow us to not build it into the ongoing operating budget. So a little bit different item in that account. Budget Article 3 is the main operating budget for the town. Proposed for FY21, $98 million budget, a 3.89% increase over the current year. In the table, we have laid out by category how that $98 million is made up and the difference each year. So again, you'll hear presentation on all of these budget components at your next meeting. But we're really at a point where we're at about 3.5, 3.6 budget increases for school and municipal. Our fixed cost increase about 6.3%. And again, we'll go through those components in detail at your next meeting. I should have said at the beginning, we are currently close to production on our budget books, the municipal book. We're in print today and we'll finish up tomorrow. So you'll be getting those books by the end of the week. And I know the school is on the same target. So you'll have all of that information that shows the detail behind this table within the next couple of days. And then you'll have that presentation at your meeting.
Barb?
Yes.
Just one quick question, Pam. What happened? I thought we were over $100 million for fiscal year '21.
So that's the entire spending at town meeting. This is just the operating budget.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Got it.
So we will still be over 100 million when you see total. Yep.
Any other questions so far?
Okay. So the next series of articles, budget 4 through 10, deal with the capital budget. And so in our capital budget articles, we're appropriating for capital resources for the town, the school, and sewer. So we vote the budget in a series of articles. Our annual capital articles, or sometimes we'll say the base articles, budgets 4 through 7. So Article 4 is the base municipal capital, 5, the base school capital, 6, the sewer capital, and that's all funded by sewer revenue. And 7, any capital that we have specific funds for. Typically, that's ambulance in that article, and it is this year. So those are kind of our standard articles that we have each year for capital. As you're aware, in recent years, we've tried to do some additional capital beyond that base in a way to kind of compensate for years when we were not meeting our targets on our capital spending. So we do have 3 additional capital articles this year, Articles 8, 9, and 10. I just quickly, before we look at the capital.
And can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have you decided how you're breaking them down, like by source or by purpose, or?
Yes, you'll see that as we go through, yes. These next 2 slides, I just wanted, before we talked about the specific capital, these are slides you saw when we came in December. This first slide just shows, that bar chart shows our base capital for school and municipal over the last several year period. We've tried to point out that in the years on the left, FY 11, 12, 13, we were spending far below our targets per our financial policies on capital. We were, only about a third of what we needed to be at capital. The select board and town meeting and the finance commission have really made an emphasis over the last couple of years to do better on capital. And we've been able to meet our target essentially in the current year. We spent $2.3 million in this year's FY20 budget. We're on target to do that again in FY21. So we've had significant improvement in our ongoing base capital. And that's really important. It allows us to make sure we're maintaining our buildings, that we're properly turning over equipment for police and fire and DPW. The second slide, again, we looked at this in detail at your December meeting, is just a look at that additional capital. Because we were under our targets for so many years, the town has, since FY17, tried to have some additional capital each year to get at some of these projects that had been neglected. So the bar chart here shows what that spending has been in the additional capital for each of the last couple of years. So now looking at the actual capital articles as they currently stand. So the first one, Article 4, is the base municipal capital, a series of items listed totaling $1.3 million. That article would be funded entirely by free cash. This is the same level of appropriation for the municipal capital as in the current year, and we funded in the current year with free cash also. You can see it's a wide range of departments being addressed, as it is each year, from COA, DPW, important fire equipment, police and fire, and building maintenance. So this is our kind of standard article that looks to get out to all of our departments on important capital. We will point out one item about halfway down the list, the fire swap body truck. You've heard about that over the last year. A large piece of equipment, about a $400,000 item. The fire chief is pursuing a grant opportunity for that equipment. What's been included here in this list is $20,000 that would be required as a town match were we to be successful in receiving that grant.
And I would add that if we don't receive that grant, we expect to come back next year with a request for the full capital to purchase, as long as the select board supports it, but that would be the follow-up if the grant doesn't come through.
So again, as we go forward with the budget meetings, as you start to meet with all of the municipal department heads, you'll get more information on each of these capital items. But overall, this is kind of the standard list for us as far as equipment and maintenance, and the amount is, again, similar to what we did in the current year.
Can I just ask a question? So he's pursuing something where our only obligation would be this match? Okay.
Correct.
So it pays to wait, okay.
We think it's, the grant is obviously would be substantial, but it's worth pursuing, so we want to do that.
Well, there's got to be strings tied to that. Should we wait till the fire chief tells us what conditions are tied to that grant?
I don't know what you mean by that, but we'll ask him to be here.
And any federal grant or state grant has got to have obligations that the grantee agrees to meet in order to accept the money. So I'm just wondering if you know what those are.
I don't know that there are such, but we'll talk to him and have him here when we follow up on the capital articles.
Typically, Chris, on equipment, it is a town match, where sometimes there's additional restrictions on grants that might involve staffing or new programs or whatever. The equipment ones are usually pretty basic with the requirement of a town match. Okay, the next article, Budget 5, is the school capital budget article. And again, this is the standard base school article that we do each year. So a series of items listed here totaling just over $1 million and funded by free cash. And again, that's the same appropriation level and funding source as in the current year. And the items listed here and the amounts designated have been presented to us from the school administration. The next slide, Article 6, are the sewer capital improvements, totaling $765,000, 4 items. Again, these are all funded with sewer retained earnings, which is essentially the free cash within the sewer enterprise fund. At the bottom of that slide, Article 7, just 2 small items for the ambulance that we would fund with ambulance receipts, just over $64,000. Again, that is the similar amount that was done in that article at the most recent town meeting. Sometimes we keep that separate because in some years where we're purchasing the ambulance, it's a much larger amount going into that article. Article 8, so this is the first of the additional capital. So as we've done, as I showed since FY17, a couple of articles trying to get at some capital beyond what we could do within those base capital articles. So the first here, a series of just over $1 million, funded by free cash. You see the items listed, a couple of which are, we did part 1 last year's town meeting, and we're coming in and doing part 2 in this list here.
Since we had the Disability Commission come before us and we heard about some issues at Town Hall, could you describe what the plans on the Town Hall improvements are?
Sure. So we are looking at a number of things within the town hall, and primarily the access to the main floor. So one of the challenges that we have that you may be familiar with is putting an elevator is a simple fix outside of cost. But that would also trip a number of other code requirements that we would have to make for the building. So with our facilities manager, we are looking at different ways to provide access. He's working with an architect as we speak to come up with some different ideas to improve the access to the primary floor.
Okay. Howard?
The security project's a result of the study that was done?
Yes, so the schools have hired a consultant, had a study done, and the town is underway with that, learning from some of what they had done. So that's the next phase, and in this case, it's reserving funds to actually implement.
I thought we did the study townwide, it was just for the schools?
So far,
Security? Oh, okay.
that's the one
The
that's been
schools were
completed.
further ahead than the
Okay.
town. They had
Okay.
started theirs first,
Right.
so.
Article 9 is an additional article for capital improvements, primarily recreation, townwide recreation projects. And this article would be funded with revenue from the meals and hotel tax account. So 3 items listed, just over $1 million, dealing with a field project and then pool-related repairs.
Regarding the field project, as you know, we received approval for funds last year to analyze the Thurston field and what would be involved in installing lights. And what we want to do is, and we'll come back with more detail, is look at, is that the best place to invest capital money? We also have the land behind First Parish Church that you're aware the town purchased from the church a few years ago, and looking at that as an option. What we know is we need to do something about the inventory of fields we have in town. We also have the Westwood Lodge field that's offline right now that would be back online in the fall. We have the school project potentially coming up. As part of that project, the discussion includes what can be done with regard to fields, as, you know, to be incorporated in whatever site there might be a new school building project or a rehabilitation of a school, whatever. So this is a comprehensive look at what we can do to help improve the inventory of fields we have in town.
Cindy?
That was my question. I just remember that from last year and was wondering what had come of the
Yeah, the
discussion
study's
last
been
year.
completed. We're in real time trying to decide the best way to move forward and how much we need in capital for this year, but it's a broader look forward as well as what can we do now.
Given the amount, I think it warrants that we have a full discussion here. Like, I don't know whether you
will.
want to present the field study or what, how you want to handle that.
Yeah, we need to have more discussion at the select board level, and we'll come forward with our recommendation.
Okay. Anything else on that? Okay. Chris?
This $1 million is obviously a projection, how much we expect to get for the meals and hotel tax for fiscal year '21, is that right?
We have a base.
So the meals tax, we have to already have before we can use it,
Oh, okay.
just the way that account works.
It makes more sense to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we already have, we currently, right now, have, it's about $1.4 million in the meals and hotel tax account. We expect that to be $1.8 million by the end of the year if current revenue continues. But if we vote that at town meeting, we already have to have the funds in hand.
Got it, thank you.
The last capital article is one item. We had a a large piece of equipment for the DPW department, $325,000. That's a bit larger than our typical equipment for them. And so we are proposing that we would do that as a borrowing approval. We would do a very short-term borrowing, less than a 5-year time frame, but that would allow us to smoothen the cost of this piece of equipment easier than trying to fit that within our capital allocation. And we will be out to borrow the town for things we already have been approved of borrowing, or if the road improvement bond goes forward, we could incorporate that into that borrowing process.
Is there a mismatch in the term, though?
But we can borrow and have different pieces be different
Oh,
terms.
okay,
Yeah.
so you could do
But we would
this
just
shorter
never
term.
do that equipment on a longer term. But it was just where that's a little bit higher than our normal equipment, which would be typically in the 175 to 200 range. It would be beneficial for us to propose that as a borrowing. The next budget, Article 11, is our standard appropriation each year into our stabilization fund. We've been doing pretty consistently, you can see by the graph, a small transfer each year from free cash into the fund just to keep us on target. This is the town's main savings account. It's a very important component of our credit rating. So Article 11 would transfer $125,000 from free cash into the stabilization, and we're really in good shape with that account. Article 12 is the appropriation for the OPEB liability. So this article would appropriate $1.465 million into the OPEB liability trust account. The bar graph shows the appropriation each year that we've been making. And as the board is well aware, in those early years, as shown on the left of the graph, we were, struggling with this account and just trying to get a handle on this liability. The Select Board and the Finance and Warrant Commission and our town meeting have worked very hard to get on track with this, and we have. So we currently now are on a funding schedule to increase the appropriation by $25,000 each year. So that is the proposal shown in green for FY21, just increasing our current appropriation by $25,000, and this allows us to stay on our funding schedule. We're in very good shape now with this liability, with addressing it, and again, this is an important component now of our credit rating. We currently have in that trust account $10.7 million. And I know many of you were here when we had $0 in that account, so this has been a good feature just to stay on track with this each year. And then our last item is the, oops, sorry.
If I may, I'm curious about what the total unfunded liability is and whether there is a minimum requirement that must be contributed each year.
Yes, and we can go through that further at the budget meeting, but we're required to have our unfunded liability updated every other year. So by an actuary, so we have data on what our total unfunded liability is. I think our most recent was just under $40 million. We're required to update the liability. We're required to report it on our financial statements. There is currently no requirement to fund. But we would get negative remarks in our credit review, and it would hurt our bond rating if we weren't addressing the liability. But there is currently no requirement in the state for communities to fund.
We haven't had the OPEB presentation in a while, so I think that's one thing for the fall. I guess, when are you having the?
So we'll go through kind of the current status at the next meeting, but we're currently having the liability updated. They indicated we would start to see that data mid to end of February.
Okay.
We talked before about that study's not going to change what we're appropriating this year, but it might for the future years. So maybe once we get past the budget cycle, we'll have the actuary come in.
Or for the fall.
And go through that the fall. It's always exciting.
Make a note of that, I might be here. Okay.
I can't wait.
Yes, and it's a required meeting.
It's more fun now that we're, on track
Yeah,
and making good
yeah, it was very
progress.
depressing.
Yes.
It was very depressing before.
It was depressing. So the last budget article is the road improvement bond, and we are going to have Todd come and go through
And
that with you. Oh, and Brendan, bring Brendan Ryan also. Thank you.
Pam, thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, Todd.
Tish is making the quick change within the presentation on the fly.
If you can introduce yourself, because there are people here that probably
Sure.
haven't actually met you yet, so.
So I am Todd Korcha, I'm the Director of Public Works.
And I'm Brendan Ryan, the Assistant Director for the Public Works.
Those of you that have met me before has been throughout this process, and those that have seen Brendan on the road, he's really the architect that gets these projects moving forward and as efficient as they're done. That said, I am back here to discuss the road improvement bond. Members that were on the commission last year obviously heard a presentation regarding this. We were able to last year complete a small portion of what I had presented at that time, that being the sidewalk improvements along Route 109. So just to start, we basically work off of a pavement management program within our department. The pavement management program is the driving force behind our proposed improvements and maintenance program annually. That said, things change, things can fluctuate over the course of a winter season. We typically project out 3 to 4 years in advance of what we're going to perform for paving projects, preventative measures. But again, that is subject to change over the course of any given winter. Our roadway ratings have remained in the low to mid 80s, well above the average for the region. Typical average in any other community is high 60s, low 70s. We've been able to take advantage of our aggressive bidding nature, getting great contractors in and great construction management. This program also identifies and has identified the need to supplement our annual Chapter 90 allotment. Every year, we receive approximately $540,000 from the state to $560,000. That it is no means enough to maintain our current index. If you look at the scenarios at the bottom of the screen and the chart, it depicts scenario 3 is really where we should be, keep a steady grade average of what we have for our roadway infrastructure. And that indicates a need for about $850,000. So simple math shows that we actually we do have a shortfall of what we receive from the state and what we need. That said, we put together our 2020 road improvement bond. It's important to note that it does consist of 4 major components. Our Route 109 paving project, crosswalk safety improvements, paving and sidewalk enhancements, and pure pavement preservation techniques. The first component is our Route 109 paving project. Like I had mentioned earlier, we've completed the sidewalk upgrades during the fall of 2019. That cost approximately $900,000 to do all of the work. The reviews from the entire community have been outstanding, and we've observed and witnessed on several occasions just people taking advantage of the new infrastructure out there. It's safer, it's more sound, and aesthetically much more pleasing. The estimated cost for us to do the resurfacing now that's more than necessary along Route 109 is about $2.55 million. The approximate limits run from 128 all the way up to the Bubbling Brook Walpole Town Line. Sidewalk improvements, like I had mentioned, have all been updated and upgraded. There will be various locations where we will bring ADA compliance up to grade with some of the ramp issues that we have. It's our hopes too, obviously, if this bond is supported, that we can move forward and get this project completed by the end of the summer.
I don't recall last year, I do recall the conversation we had last year, but it didn't gain enough traction and move forward. What was it cost last year, projected cost?
The cost last year was, I want to say in that presentation, it was 1.6, but we've added some more features into the program this year and expanded the limits of work. Initially, last year, we were looking at doing Gay Street down to the Bubbling Brook Town Line. That said, we've expanded upon that now. We're going to do the whole stretch of 109, along with installing some additional granite curbing just to pair up with the recent sidewalk project that we completed this past fall. Just for the sake of consistency, the sake of incorporating, you know, the vertical granite curbing features, just to make it consistent and, again, aesthetic value within the whole corridor. So we've tacked on some more.
Did Dedham Wested Water do their project along the way?
Yep, Dedham Western Water has completed their project. And we worked collaboratively with them throughout our sidewalk project, throughout their project, so. It also important to note, too, this project would include reflective markings, better signage, just things that are overall safety features and significant aesthetic improvements. Second, oh, I'm sorry.
But it's not changing the it's not increasing, adding turning lanes or changing
No,
anything?
no.
Just a repaving?
Correct.
And it's about 3 miles, I guess, right? All 3 miles can be done just in the summer?
That's what we're going to go for.
Okay.
We like to be challenged. Second component of the bond is our crosswalk safety improvements. There's been a number of questions over the past year and a half that we released the fact that we have this in a draft format. It's very important to know that this information is still very much in a draft format. Nothing has been completely finalized. However, we do have cost estimates associated with all the recommended improvements. There are 202 locations throughout the community. Not all 202 need to be addressed, but there are a significant amount that do. The study looked at existing traffic conditions, markings, signage, and alignments, and provided recommended improvements and enhancements. Within the crosswalk evaluation, the back appendix has a matrix that was developed, and again, represented on all 202 locations. Inventory components within the matrix included pedestrian signage. Now, these are all examples of what this matrix recommended for these improvements. So you're looking at pedestrian signage at and in advance of crosswalks. Some needed new signage to be removed or reset. Enhanced pavement markings, ADA compliant ramps with the detectable warning panels. Those are the yellow panels that you'll see in every ADA compliant ramp. Catch basin and utility adjustments necessary whenever you're tweaking or adding ramps, or drainage could be impacted. There is some alignment and geometrical reconfiguration that was recommended at a couple of locations. Vegetation trimming to improve sight distance. And at the end of that matrix, again, was a cost estimate that tallied all of these scores up and gave us a number each and every location recommended.
Question?
So Peter, yes.
I have a question about the previous slide, actually, the $500,000 crosswalk for the intersection of Clambert Tree and Pond Street.
Right.
I'm interested in whether that is related to the development at what used to be the Westwood Lodge property, and if this will need to be done again after that development takes place.
No, this has no relation to that development. This is strictly just looking at some realignment within that particular crossing location. But if you'll see in component number 3, you're ahead of the game on this. But that intersection, Winter Street and Clabber Tree Street, I'll jump to that. I'll answer your question when I get to that slide, if you don't mind.
I have a question.
Okay, so, is it this along the same way, or,
No, it's on crosswalk.
okay.
The crosswalks that are not at intersections, what's being done for them?
There's any of those crosswalks that aren't directly at intersections have also been part of this study, and there are recommendations associated with each and every one of them.
Will they have pedestrian crossing signs in the middle?
Those are features that are offered as recommendations with cost estimates associated. So the ones that that the study indicates need those, we would be addressing.
There won't be all of them, there'll be some crosswalks.
I don't want to say there won't be all of them, but there's a fair amount of them that will be incorporated as part of this
But
program.
just as a small point, I find people ignore the crosswalks that aren't, unless there's a sign there.
That's a detail that I agree with you, and I just don't want to speak on behalf of the entire study, but I can say that there are a fair amount of those within the study itself recommended.
Question for you, are there any places where they're going to be adding crosswalks that currently don't have them in this study?
No, no.
And, I forgot my other question. Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
You should. Thank you.
Yeah, back to
We can go
Peter's
back.
question.
So when we get into component 3, this will answer your
I
question,
thought of
Peter.
mine. Are you going to have any sort of neighborhood, as you're looking at each one, neighborhood contact or reaching out to a neighborhood when you're going to address it so that they're aware of what you're going to be doing?
I suppose depending upon the scenario, if there's a lot of heavy lift involved, perhaps, or a disruption to the existing infrastructure that would require perhaps public safety to come in and set up a temporary setup of some nature, depending upon the scale and magnitude of the work associated with each location, we would obviously address accordingly. We wouldn't just go in there and do something or shut something down without notification or the notification
Okay,
process.
so not really as far as when you're planning on when you're going in, planning what you're doing. It's more of how you're getting it done that you'll meet with people.
Correct. And everything, all the improvements that we do, we'll hope to somehow in some way post online or at least express a schedule and what it is. And as always, we're always open and very receptive to any residents that have any questions or concerns, and we can go over plans and show them. But I do want to stress, there really is no heavy lift construction associated with these. These are more signage features, traffic markings, potential imprints, slight geometrical reconfiguration, as I mentioned, but nothing that's going to require a shutdown of a road to reconfigure something. So the third component consists of paving and sidewalk enhancements throughout the community. So as the question that Peter had just brought up, so we had the recommendation from the previous slide right here that depicts Clabbertree Street and Pond Street and crosswalk locations. We had applied for a grant opportunity through the Complete Streets program to upgrade the intersection of Clabbertree Street and Winter Street. And that also was going to include updated sidewalks in front of the property that you mentioned where the development's going off of 45 Clabbertree Street. What we're going to do now, because we were denied another grant application from the state, because we have already received two, and that's been the common message that we've received two, and we want to give another community a chance, we are going to have to fund this project town-wise from a municipal standpoint. That project will be integrated cohesively with our improvements with the crosswalk program, so we're not going to disrupt anything that we do, one or the other, whichever comes first. What we'll do is we'll bid that project all in one. So it'll be the Clabbertree Street intersection improvements with sidewalk improvements going down Clabbertree Street, tying into the new crosswalk improvements at Lakeshore Pond, tying into the new sidewalk enhancements from Pond Street at Lakeshore all the way up to the Sheehan School. So it's all going to be one flow of a project. So this program right here, estimated cost with that intersection that I mentioned is $1.6 million. Along with that intersection improvement and the sidewalk improvements, High Rock Street will be resurfaced with new sidewalks with granite curbing installed. If you drive up High Rock Street right now, there's no granite curbing reveal. There's absolutely no safety feature for pedestrians to use. There is a sidewalk, but there is no buffer between the roadway and sidewalk. Hartford Street from Route 109 all the way to Wessex Drive. So from Route 109 on Hartford Street down to approximately High Rock, there is granite curbing there. However, it's bituminous sidewalk, which means it's asphalt sidewalk. Our goal and intention throughout our entire program is to replace our bituminous sidewalks with concrete sidewalks like we have with every recent project throughout the community. Unfortunately, currently right now, from High Rock all the way up to Wessex, there is no granite curbing, and we simply have bituminous sidewalk again, with no buffer from edge of pavement to the sidewalk. So that project too would entail granite curbing with concrete sidewalks. So if you can envision our goal here, it's High Rock coming up, new sidewalk, new granite curbing, and Hartford Street where there's asphalt sidewalk, concrete sidewalk, along with where there is currently no curbing, granite curb feature. And then that too at that intersection, heading up from Hartford Street up to 109 on High Rock, that too would receive granite curbing and new concrete sidewalks. I mentioned Pond Street as part of that project, tying into the Winter Street intersection project that would receive new concrete where there is bituminous. And there's other one location in town too, where the East Street Bridge project came out fantastic. The state did a great job. Again, Brenda did a great job overseeing and working with the state with that project, but unfortunately, the new sidewalk stretch dead-ended right after the bridge project. That was strictly the limits of that work. It's our hopes, again, if this is approved, that we move forward and replace the existing sidewalk that is along East Street right now. It's asphalt. Come in and put concrete sidewalks in there again, making it all ADA compliant.
Question? Todd, the Eversource recently replaced a number of utility poles along that sidewalk. Is that going to interfere with your ability to reconstruct?
We're trying to work with them. In fact, we just received a phone call, it was about a week ago, pertaining to an issue that we had with the recent snowstorm with our tractor machine going through there. It's a pretty involved process with Eversource to get them to remove the second the older of the two utility poles. They have to work in collaboration with Verizon, Comcast, and then have everybody communicate. So you can only imagine that it takes a while, but it's our hopes before we get to this project that they're able to remove the multiple setup that's there. And I hope, Peter, did that answer your question with respect to the okay. This is just a slide here that just really depicts the locations that we're looking to address. There's nothing that I haven't mentioned here in the previous slide, just the specific locations of what we're looking to do from this segment of the bond. And our final component isn't necessarily a financial commitment of the bond, but I want to deem the theme of this bond is providing not only our department but the entire community a level of flexibility to address things outside the norm of just paving and preventative measures. And we're able to do that. These heavy lift projects, sidewalk enhancements that we receive a number of phone calls daily on, in curbing installation and crosswalk locations, that's great for us to address within the bond itself. It also allows us to free up some of our Chapter 90 funding and make it more flexible that we can do the very important preventative measures, crack sealing, fog sealing, microsurfacing, things that actually maintain the current index of what we have out there from a pavement standpoint. So by incorporating this program into our community, along with our Chapter 90 program, and have them work back and forth with each other, again with aggressive bidding, great project oversight out in the field, I see this as a very successful project. There's a lot of projects within it, but I'm calling it one major project for the community. I see it lasting probably 2 years, the way that we would phase this out. 109 obviously would be first out of the gate, and then some of these other locations we would do in year 2. As much as we like to be super busy and run around and get everything done and have everything look nice, it would be extremely disruptive to the community if we just did it all at once. It could be done, but I don't want to do that. So that said, I broke down on the last slide here. It just simply breaks down the cost. Again, these are cost estimates, but it's our hopes, again, with aggressive bidding, that things come in that aggressive, that we have even a higher level of flexibility to maybe even address a few more things outside the scope of this bond. So.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for him?
I do. When you repave 109, will there be any addressing of the way the lights flow so that at 2:30 in the afternoon you can get out of town?
You're on to something. If you can recall, we sought out some funding to pursue the adaptive signalization program through the state, and we're making serious headway with that right now. That project will be funded through the TIP program. It's about a $650,000 to $700,000 project that the state has been very receptive to. So that said, that doesn't involve any construction. So whatever we do from a pavement standpoint, that's all technology above the ground. But that's our hope. So within the scope of this, no, but that we have also moving in it quite frankly could jive right upon completion of this. I don't want to, that's very hopeful and wishful thinking, but there is a potential for that to happen. But it's in line right now to take shape and form. So you just want to address that the right way, and that adaptive signalization technology that we're pursuing is really, it's a great hope for us. It's our last hope for this corridor, but they're using the technology actually in the Seaport District too. So that's a pretty well-known area. So hopefully it works here for us.
At the last select board meeting, there was some discussion about the traffic patterns at the 128 end of 109. I think what you did worked. I don't know what the end result's gonna be, but is your plan on resurfacing 109 going to permanently change that end one way or another?
Sure, it's our hopes that what we put out there will become permanent. We do have some more information that we're going to be bringing back to the select board, probably towards the tail end of February, early March. Information that hopefully points us in a direction of one or the other, either revert back to what was previously there or keep what's there and deem it at a permanent level, which would obviously mean, I keep using the term aesthetically, but aesthetically more pleasing and much safer, more importantly, that we're able to incorporate clearer, more defined lines. It's tough to really gauge the level of effectiveness unless you do it at a permanent level. The temporary setup out there has proven to be successful, but it's not fully clear, the lane configuration right now, so it's not as clear as it would be if we did it at a permanent level. So either way, once we do our resurfacing, yes, it will be at a permanent. We won't go there and look to rip it up unless ripping it up meant someone else was going to pay for the improvements. So.
But this condition meets all industry standards. The
Correct.
temporary condition, if you
Correct.
could just.
Yep, and the current condition that we have out there does meet all industry standards as well. That was a question that got brought up.
I have a question about general background, I guess. Isn't 109 a state road?
No.
It is not. It is.
No, it used to be. Predating me, it was, and then, and maybe one of the select board members can attest to when the town took it over. No.
Probably Mr. Hearn can remember back.
I actually can't remember that project.
I had heard someone referenced at one point when we did all the construction, and this
Yeah, when we put it
predated,
in.
yeah. that there-
Oh, yeah, Steve Olenoff can answer that one.
When we had the big project with the state, with the state paid, repaving Route 109, that's when, as part of that project, it was turned over from the state.
Thank you.
Same thing with Wyatt.
I knew that. Okay. Any more questions? Are we all set with Todd? I'm sure we'll hear from you again when we get to
We
the
will.
hearing time.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a state number, I guess.
Yes.
Are we moving on to the articles now? Because I had one follow-up
Oh.
regarding the budget.
Oh, yeah, yeah, Pam is still here, she definitely.
So I'm wondering if it's possible to get any information, and you probably can get your hands on this faster than I can, but I'd really be curious to see towns of a similar size with budgets over $100 million, what the breakdown of the tax burden is on residents versus businesses, and just to get an idea of like what we're, giving to the town in terms of a tax burden.
Sure.
So maybe you could
Yeah,
get
we
that
can-
information faster than I could.
We can pull that together, yes.
I would say the one caveat that goes with that might need to be another data point is how much commercial property or land exists, because one of the things that Westwood has always been constrained by is our commercial real estate, how much we have. And communities differ on that, so that might be a way, after we look at it, to explain the delta.
You can include it, but I think that the pure burden of it, and when you're just paying your tax bill, that piece isn't coming into effect. Like, it doesn't, do you know what I mean? Like, I only feel what we feel when we pay the tax bill every year.
Pam
So-
certainly has provided stuff that shows that if we didn't have a split tax rate, what
No,
our
and I
tax
understand
rate
the
would
split
be.
tax rate. I'm just talking about sheer numbers of, what is the dollar amount? How many communities in the Commonwealth of a similar size have budgets over $100 million? And what is their commercial burden versus the burden that they're putting on their residents to afford that?
Barb, can I ask one
Yep.
quick question as well? Going back to the field project, Nancy, the $760,000 figure, is that specific to the Thurston area? And you mentioned the first parish
Yeah.
parcel. Is that a separate, would that be a separate figure?
That number did come about because of the Thurston study and what it would take to install lights. So that number may adjust depending on what comes out of the work we're doing now for this town meeting. But I would say, let's just say the number went down because we need to do more work on the first parish, and that seems like the way to go. And just so you know, there have been discussions at the Rec Commission in favor of the first parish, but as I said, the select board has to do more work and look at this more. We may bring the number down to prepare for that, but that won't be the capital to actually do it if we go with the first parish. So the number's a little bit fluid, and what we actually do, we have identified, but we still have to work on what we're going to bring forward to this town meeting.
So there will be a solid plan before we're voting on this. There's
That's
a
what we're
solid
working
plan.
towards,
Okay.
yes, yeah, okay. So the commitment's there, we just have to figure out the best road to take on it,
Right. Thank you.
okay? To the other articles, the non-financial articles, and we don't have a long list, but there are a few highlights we'd like to make. The first one relates to the fire alarm system regulations. Our fire chief, John Deckers, would like us to bring this article forward to change the alarm system for any building that is presently hardwired and pursue having them switch over to a radio master alarm system. So we have municipal buildings, there are houses of worship buildings, there are privately owned commercial buildings that are still under what is the hardwired system. And he is proposing that we make this change in our general bylaws with an implementation timeframe of 3 years. So giving it 3 years for anybody to plan budgetarily, hire, do whatever work is necessary. And it has a little teeth on it that if that deadline is not met, there's the ability to have a fine imposed. But the goal isn't to impose the fine, the goal is to get the change to be made. And there are a number of buildings, some have gone through changes already, some municipal buildings, I don't know how many municipal buildings we're down to, and we'll be providing you with a list of all the buildings. But progress is made, but there are still, I think, about 26 buildings that need to be changed. So this is the fire chief's request that we allow him to pursue that with property owners.
Is this a state law, a state trend, from what I understand? Because I've known about this for a while, and I knew we were going to be doing it at some point. Is this?
I would
what's
imagine it
happening?
is. I can't speak to that like the fire chief
I'm
can,
looking
but
at
we'll bring him
Chris,
back
because
for
he's
more.
had some
It
experience
is something
in
that's
other
happening in other communities as well.
Okay.
Do we have
Yes, Peter, oh, sorry.
Which Peter?
Peter this and then Peter that.
Do we have some sort of rule of thumb of how much this is going to cost?
I think we've been told about $5,000,
About $5,500.
$5,500 per,
So it's significant.
it is.
I-
It is. It's consequential, but, it's still important that the shift be made.
A related question. You mentioned that there are some buildings that do not belong to the town that may need to make the switch. You referred to houses of worship. Who will pay for that
The
conversion?
houses of worship, that's the private property owner's responsibility. That's already happened in some buildings.
Yeah, I can speak for First Parish because I belong there, and we've already done this. That's why when we put our addition on, we had a new system put in, and it was more than 5,500, but it was already encompassed. So if you've already had a project done, it's probably incorporated, but.
The next article is, we mentioned it at a meeting 2 weeks ago with you, a non-binding resolution that would have net zero energy requirements on any new school and municipal building construction. What I want to do is just spend probably a few minutes, but not too long, talking to frame this in a context of what the town has accomplished over a number of years as it relates to environmental matters, because this is really a continuation of a lot of work the town has been doing. So we have a very long history in Westwood of trying to become more responsible in the context of our energy consumption and environmental matters. This has been supported by Finance Commission, many boards in town, the Select Board, and town meeting through many votes that have been made to allow us to make progress in this regard. And we have a town staff that does an extensive amount of work. And some of you may know, and for those who don't, it was as recently as 2014, but we have had it in place for 5 years. We now have an energy manager. And if you haven't met Tom Philbin yet, when you do, you'll know an extremely knowledgeable and professional in this field, and he's brought his background to the town as our energy manager and has overseen a number of projects to date. The work that gets done through all this that I mentioned impacts town properties and it impacts private property owners. Back in 2012, the town, through town meeting, adopted the Stretch Energy Code. So that's building code requirements that are imposed on everybody. And that ensured greater energy efficiency in new construction and any sustainable renovation in buildings. All the buildings at University Station through the zoning bylaw were designated to be constructed as solar ready. And I think it was mentioned at the last meeting that Target has actually installed solar panels. And separate from the University Station zoning, Eversource has solar energy canopies on their building. But many elements of University Station in the zoning promoted environmentally conscious design elements in them. In terms of town-owned properties, we've done an extensive amount of work as it relates to buildings being solar ready. Both the police station and the fire station were designed to be solar ready. And sometimes there's an advantage to not building that in as a requirement in construction, because now the town's going forward with a company called Amoresco to install solar panels. Tom Philbin has worked with Amoresco and identified school buildings, so we have solar panels on the high school, Thurston Middle School, Martha Jones, and Downey. So we've already made progress. Now they're back working with us on a phase 2. And phase 2, if it moves forward, would include actually putting solar panels on the police station and the parking lot. Consideration is given to putting solar panels over the parking at the Council on Aging building. And the fourth item would be a solar canopy on the Shuttleworth property, but not to interfere with the potential school building project if one happens on that same area, which is the Hanlon School area. The reason I say sometimes it's good to wait, Amoresco financially takes on the responsibility. The town doesn't have to put money towards these particular solar projects, but we're the beneficiary with some substantial cost savings in our operating budgets. Let's see, I want to add that back in 2014, the town qualified and became a green community, so that's a state level designation. And we had to meet 5 clean energy benchmarks. After we did that, through the Department of Public Works and Tom's effort and Tish Healy's effort when she was working with the DPW and still does some work with them, we have received $1.2 million in grants. And the town has supported that funding with an additional $750,000 in funding. So there's been a lot of collaborative effort and work, and I'm not going to go through the list of all the things we've done, but I just want you to know that over time we have been making really impressive headway. I'll add that the comprehensive plan that is underway for being updated this time had an additional requirement that it did not 20 years ago, and that is a sustainability and resiliency requirement. And I was just recently speaking with Pete Kane, who is a very strong advocate in town.
Former FinCom member.
Former FinCom member, and I tell you, moves a mountain to make some progress here. He said, we need the sustainability plan. It's actually called out in the draft of the updated comprehensive plan, and he and I were talking about the timing and needing to get going on that. So I just want you to know the town has made considerable progress. So I look at this non-binding resolution and say it's already had a positive impact just by bringing it forward, because on Thursday there is a meeting of the school building committee, and we are going to be having what they're calling a sustainability workshop as it relates to the building design for the new elementary school building. And the discussion will relate to designing it as a net zero energy building, what other features can be brought in. So this fits in a long line of good things that we're doing. It's done as a non-binding resolution because we don't want to be so restrictive as to push economic issues that we aren't sure of, but this is to really guide the town and do more of what we're already trying to do and do it even better in our new buildings. So that's that one.
Just out of curiosity, on the school, does the State Building Authority, State School Building Authority have any parameters of what, that we should be net zero, or?
No,
do
it
they
does
any
not have
instances?
requirements.
Do they have, or do they give us any extra percentage for being net zero?
That I don't know. It's quite possible they do. I mean, certainly they aren't without guidelines in terms of, I don't know how it's specifically spelled out, but many buildings are designed to LEED standards, but they aren't required. That's LEED. They aren't required to actually fulfill them and get documented as having them, but the design elements are moving towards much better environmentally designed buildings. We aren't required through them to do a net zero energy building, but we do have through our consultant, the architect, there is a sub-consultant that specializes in the environmental design matters. And we even had that when we were talking about the police and fire station. And we had additional analysis done on the police station, and while we designed it and it was built to be able to hold solar panels on the top, there were some elements of design that were extremely expensive. And there's always that balance as a municipality to doing something responsible and yet understanding the cost implications. But I think even progress has been made on that in terms of how to design buildings and have them work. We look at the payback period. Some people would say, you got to do it anyway, and I think that's where we make decisions. Having this be non-binding gives us a little flexibility, but we really want to move and do this.
Are there any more questions on this one?
I just have a
No.
comment.
Wait, Chris.
Chris, go first.
Why do we need this? If you're doing such great work, and you even mentioned that we're doing great work, then why do we need to have a town meeting warrant to say that we're doing great work?
Well, as I said, bringing this forward and having the discussion is elevating the discussion as we're doing the school building project. It's just acknowledging and conveying the message that this is a standard we should be trying to achieve. And I think being out there about it is better than being silent on it. And it would have, timing is everything. If we had more of this discussion before the public safety, might there have been some differences? There may have been, but I think at large, building designs are going this way. There's no harm in having it. I think there's benefit by saying we as a town want this.
Well, first of all, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Okay? But my concern is what Barb mentioned before about the Massachusetts State Building Authority. And my concern is that there might be aspects of a net zero architecture that the MSPBA won't fund.
Oh, we'll be very careful with
And that will
Chris.
actually drop our percentage
No,
rather than
no,
raise it.
we won't do, I understand what you're saying. We won't let that happen.
Okay.
The owner's project manager, Compass Project Management is the company, and the architect, Doran Whittier, both have worked with the state and know the school building authority and know how they work, what they require, what we need to do. So they're guiding us in this process as well. So we won't be surprised by, I don't think we want to work towards being penalized for doing this, and I just don't think that's the way the MSBA
That's not the way they're
moves towards it.
operating now.
And I hardly think we're being secretive about how we build our buildings. Like you mentioned, we built the fire station that way, we built the police station that way. I just don't see the point in bringing a warrant article to the town meeting that says, we don't have to follow this if we don't want to.
Well,
But we are anyway, right?
well,
And because the select board can do it anyway.
we can't, this doesn't require it. We can't require it on the select board of the people that are working on it,
No,
but
the
I think-
select board can pass a non-binding resolution.
Oh, yeah,
Saying that you would like to see all municipal
Yeah.
buildings
Well,
be
we're
net
doing it
zero.
this way. We're doing it this way. We think this is a good thing to do.
George?
Yeah, Nancy, I think this is a very noble goal. The only thought I have is maybe add a little language in economic viability. So the only thing I get a little nervous, I don't really know if I understand what net zero is on an individual building, but I just want to make sure that we have maybe as long as it's economically viable, this is a great goal. But I wouldn't want to see us locked into a situation where it's a goal becomes very, very expensive.
And thus, I think that's why it's non-binding,
Yeah,
because
but-
if this was a binding, I think we would have a lot more discussion about
My-
that, but town council's here.
My concern is the next step will be binding. That's why I think you may want to make sure that even a non-binding, we have some economically viable clause in there, so we can say, look, it's something we really want to do, but we have to take into consideration the economics on the town.
Okay.
Okay, because I think there may be some people who frankly may make a motion to make this a binding, so I just want to make sure we're protected.
Well, I think the question with that would be whether it's in the scope or not of the article.
but
I'd argue that that probably wouldn't
So
be in the
I
scope
also
of
want
the
to point
article.
out that this is co-sponsored with WEAC, the Environmental Awareness Committee.
Environmental Action Committee, and they are actually the initiators. This was done in Brookline with a lot more of whereases and wherefores into the resolution, and this is a little bit of a simplified version. Comment duly noted, and we'll look into that. But
Can I just?
it's your meeting.
No, I know, but I've got town council waving his finger at me, but I want Peter, Peter.
Just one more quick thing. I know we're going to deliberate this a lot more later on, but just one more point. I do know that despite some of the things that we've done, and Tom has been fantastic in what he's done for the town, projects like, say, the library, because we've increased the square footage so much, despite all the improvements that he made, utility costs still went up overall. That's what I recall.
This building preceded him,
Yeah.
and some of the actions we
So
take now.
what I'm saying is, I think this is great to keep it in the forefront of people's minds and to try to do it as a
Thank
goal. So,
Okay.
I would agree with
Madam Chairman, I'd like to let Mr. Hertz know that we went through a number of rights and rewrites on this, the last of which there was a shall and shall require, and the Board of Selectmen directed me to take that out because they felt that was, even though it's a non-binding referendum, was too prescriptive. So we've edited that out, and we give the town discretion to move in a cost-effective way. Cost-effectiveness is kind of part of the unwritten contract.
I respect that, but you just got to be careful because, for example, a lot of the benefits that are flowing from solar panels now are because tax credits people get. And I just want to make sure, at the end of the day, I'm not sure what net zero really means in terms of a building standing alone on its own. I'm sure you can achieve it, but I just want to make sure we have not put ourselves in a position where we're forced to achieve something that economically doesn't make sense. The same way with the police station, we were very careful to make sure it was designed to accept solar, but it did not make economic sense at that point in time because the technology would be changing. I just want to make sure we don't lock ourselves into something here.
That's why it's a non-binding.
But we can look into that.
Okay. Good.
We'll see what
That's it?
progress we can make.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay. The next one is a bylaw change, town bylaw, so not a zoning bylaw, regarding overnight parking restriction change of hours. We've had in place a bylaw, and what is proposed for this changes primarily the time of day that the bylaw would cover, and also what days does it cover. So previously, we had in effect, or currently, I should say, we have in effect a bylaw that restricts parking from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. every night from December 1st through March 31st. This article proposes having the prohibition to parking in effect from midnight to 7 a.m. from November 15th to April 1st, but only on such days that inclement weather conditions that require snow or ice treatment or both occur. So longer hours, but it's not fully in effect every day from the 15th of November to April 1st. Barb, you have a question already?
Yes.
And how will you notify people that it's going into effect that night?
Chris?
So one of the things that we're working on our notification systems, both through social media and the website, and we're going to be working on a campaign to encourage residents to sign up for what we call our Code Red system. So right now, you may recall, recently you received 3 phone calls. If your landline is registered, or if you haven't, or if you registered your cell phone. So what we really want to do is we want to encourage residents to sign up both with email and cell phones as well as with their landlines, because our idea is to send notifications via email and text for certain information, and use the phone call along with the email and text for those greater emergency type of notifications. So that's what we would plan to do with our communication efforts.
I would say we would also, if passed, when we get to each winter season, include information in the quarterly newsletter and whatever other means we have to let people know this is what they should expect. So there's a awareness that in all likelihood, if you see bad weather, it's going to be in place, and then the follow-up would be what Chris is saying.
And what is driving this? Is there pushback on the?
The DPW is really saying we need longer periods of time without vehicles on the road, parked on the road when we're out there, because they do a lot of pre-treatment now, and to the extent vehicles are in the way, that limits their effectiveness. 2 to 5 wasn't enough. They talked to us about midnight to 7, but there were some questions about, gee, are people going to get tickets if they're have company over that goes past midnight? Is that going to become almost a problem? And people get warnings by the police. The police are out there. So we wanted to adjust to be more practical for what is it we really need. It's during the storms, but the DPW needs more time without vehicles in the way.
So if I could, it just seems like a lot of extra work. Why not just say no cars on the road midnight to 7 a.m. from November 15th to April 1st?
That's what I'm
And leave out the part about the inclement weather.
Because that would do it all the time, and there's concern that people wouldn't be able to park in front of their houses or have company over that may go past the midnight hour.
So coming from a town that had no overnight parking ever, all year round, if we were sleeping over at my dad's house, we would just call the police station and say, we have company tonight.
Yeah, well,
And then, so then the onus is on the homeowner to call the police station, as opposed to the onus being on the town saying, well, we're gonna treat the roads tonight, and letting everybody know.
And I don't know the circumstances of that town or how big they are, but I would say the volume that might happen, and we have 6,000 households, not all of them are homes that would have people out front, but that's a lot to coordinate with the police department. I think this is a choice. It's been discussed between the DPW and the police department and town staff, and this is the recommendation that we think works best for the staff and getting it done and not being unreasonable with the residences.
Did I see your hand, Chris? Jim?
Is there going to be a penalty associated with this?
Well, the police can ticket now, or they can tow if they need to. So that wouldn't change.
Right. And are you going to use the word illegal, because that implies criminal? I don't think anyone's going to jail over that.
We'll look into that.
Howard?
Small grammar. November 15th through and including April 1st. Period of November 15th and April 1st doesn't read right.
Question?
Yep, Chris?
I could be wrong here, but I think I remember, and this was a long time ago, and no offense, but town council might remember.
If not Steve, old enough.
This is not Mike.
Mike, wasn't there a time when that was the law or the bylaw in this town was November 15th, April 1st? And then it changed?
With all due respect to Terry Methuselah here,
Do you have the right microphone? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Not that I don't recall November 15th. I do remember clearly December 1st. And but I don't recall November 15th. It could have been. I just perhaps don't recall it. And I don't recall working on a change like this before. So.
Must be wrong.
My
But I think the idea of communication is the key, is to let people know by text blast or something like that. We have all these means now, we have technology now, let's use it, and I think that's the way to go.
My only other thought is how much warning will you give people that this is going to be a night where you can't park out there? You know, you can't really let people know at 10 o'clock.
Well, certainly over time, we have more tools available in society to inform people of storms than, for instance, back in the blizzard of '78. Who knew what was really coming up until getting close? But we know more, so obviously we work with what the tools are available. And the DPW subscribes to a weather service that help them plan. So this is, this is what the town does. We have different experts communicate through our central administration and be out there as soon as possible with the public. And when we have big storms, the governor's on TV and everywhere and everything, and social media lights up with information.
Is it a milk and bread event or not?
Yeah, I hardly think Westwood wouldn't be doing this at a time when the state is. So there are ways you get included, but of course we want to let people know in as timely a way as possible. Sometimes things surprise us, though.
I'm sure we'll have more discussion on this.
We're going to do a little musical chairs again, and I'm going to invite Nora to come up and talk to you about the next 4 articles. And we'll be here along with Chris.
Hello, Nora. And you can introduce yourself, because I'm not sure everybody knows you.
I'm Nora Loughnane. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development. And the first article I'd like to cover is Article number 4, which is an article asking the town to accept municipal ownership of a portion of the former Westwood Lodge property where there's a lacrosse and soccer field. The town has used it for many years, and the current developer of the property, the Green Company, has offered it to the town for the town ownership of that lot. They are carving out the field itself and creating a 40-car parking lot adjacent to the field on the land that would be turned over to the town. In that way, the town would have continued access to this field for youth sports indefinitely. Any offer of town ownership requires the approval of town meeting. So this is an article requesting that the town accept ownership of this parcel. It's shown on the plan. That's an A&R plan, approval not required plan, that was submitted to and endorsed by the planning board in October.
Are there any restrictions on this? Can we put lights on this land?
There are restrictions that do not allow us to put lights without the approval of the homeowners association, and do not allow us to put turf on the field either. There were concerns by the developer about the use of turf on this field. So it would remain a grass field, much in the condition it's in now, but we would have the opportunity to improve the field, to reline it, to landscape around it. If we found it was necessary to add a restroom facility at some time in the future, we'd have the ability to do that as well.
Nora, what was the concern for field turf by the, curious.
So they didn't articulate it clearly, but I believe they were concerned that it would change the character of the area, and they see it as open space in their neighborhood. In fact, this development was approved under the Open Space Residential Development Plan, and so they would like it to remain in its natural state. When they came in to create this project, that area's natural state was a field, a grass field, so they'd like it to remain as such.
So, yes, Diane?
Does that mean that they have access and use of the field at the same time that, does the town actually own the field?
If
and
town
controls the field?
If
Or
town
do they-
meeting votes to accept ownership, the town will own and control the field.
Okay, so they want it to be open space. Is that for access to the residents of the new community, or?
It's for visual access to the natural environment in the area of the townhomes. The field would be owned by the town, scheduled by the town, and could be used for any youth sports or anything that the recreation department who would schedule the field deems to allow there.
Great, thanks.
Can there be restriction on dogs on the field? Like, can we, because I believe that we have some restriction on our school property on dogs.
There can be, and I would expect the recreation department to put the same requirements on that field that they put on other fields. I would think it would be very similar to the Sheehan Field, which is of similar use.
Okay, but they have geese, so.
That's true.
Jim?
Is there any form of consideration for this, or it's just a gift?
It's a gift. It's a gift that's required as a condition of the planning board approval of the development. So there were numerous conditions. I think there were probably over 50 conditions in this, and they were all negotiated with the developer, and this was one of them. When the developer first came in and looked at this property, and actually even before the developer came in, when the lodge first announced that it was planning to sell the property, the town administrator at that time was very interested in working first with the owners of the lodge and then with whatever potential buyer came into play to preserve that field. It's an important part of our recreation program. The planning board was aware of that, the developer was aware of that, and this was something, it was a precondition that they started with in their discussions.
Oh, Chris?
It's only 2.8 acres, but how much in property taxes are we going to lose now that we...
Well, we're not going to lose anything because I believe the property was a nonprofit to begin with, so we weren't collecting taxes on that field.
But a developer owns it right now.
A developer does own the property right now.
They're not nonprofit. They're paying taxes on it.
I don't know. I couldn't answer that.
Question?
Yes, Peter?
I noticed that the field includes a soccer lacrosse field now. Will the town be obligated to maintain it as a soccer lacrosse field?
It's being donated for use as a soccer lacrosse field. I imagine at some time in the future, if the town no longer wanted to use it as a soccer lacrosse field, they could allow it to go back to a natural development state, but they could not use it for something else. There will be restrictions on the use of the property. It's donated to the town to be used for a recreational area. I haven't actually worked on the development, the lease agreement that is in place now from when the town has leased that property for no charge for years to use as a lacrosse and soccer field. So I don't know what the terms are currently, but we could look into that.
When Westwood Lodge had control of this space, the town maintained the property, correct?
The town did, yes.
So there's no change?
No. The change is actually that now we'll have a parking lot, which we didn't have before. When the town used the field before, they parked in the Westwood Lodge parking spaces that were available on the other side of the access drive. And now we'll have dedicated parking spaces on the land that we own.
Mike Walsh, wait until, can you give him a microphone, please?
I just want to say that there actually is a statute that once it's recreational use, it's tough to convert it to anything else. And there's a state statute, so once it's designated as a recreational field, there is a statute that applies to that. So it's almost impossible to convert it to anything else.
Is it zoned that, what is it going to be zoned as?
It's zoned as a single residence zone, just like the rest of the property, so we're not recommending changing the zoning. There's an agreement that's in draft form that's being reviewed by town council, and that will have stipulations that are appropriate for this. So I would envision it being used for lacrosse, for soccer, for field hockey, or similar activities going forward.
I presume if the town doesn't accept it, nothing prevents them from donating it to the Westwood Land Trust, and we'd lose it anyway.
So I'd have to look back at that. I think the condition of the planning board decision requires that it be donated, offered to the town. I don't know what happens if the town doesn't accept it. I imagine that another suitable use would be allowed. But it would have to remain an open space use.
There's nothing guarantees we'd get tax money for it, is the point I'm trying to make.
True, that's true.
Right.
Okay, next.
Next is Article 5. This was an article related to the same property. the former Westwood Lodge property, and also related to a condition of the planning board approval of the open space residential development special permit. In this case, the Green Company is offering to the town what's shown on this map as Lot 1. Move forward, this map, sorry, as Lot 1. It's the top left lot. It's a residential zoned lot that's on Clabbertree Street, very close to Temple Beth David. This lot is currently being leased by the Green Company to LifeWorks for the creation of a group home. There was a lot of discussion at the time of the planning board's consideration of the open space residential development special permit, and there was concern that the group home, while supported by the neighbors and supported by the planning board, did not have the level of finality that the board was concerned with in preserving affordable housing in perpetuity. A group home is approved a little bit differently than most affordable units. A general affordable unit is deeded for use in perpetuity as an affordable unit. When you have a group home, it's placed on the subsidized housing inventory by the Department of Housing and Community Development simply upon approval by, there's an organization, I believe it's DSS, that approves the group home itself and tells the Department of Housing and Community Development this is an approved group home and it's automatically listed. There's no deed restriction that goes in favor of that that means that it will be a group home eligible for the subsidized housing inventory listing forever. So the planning board was concerned that we do something to make to better the chances of this property remaining on our subsidized housing inventory indefinitely, even if LifeWorks at some time in the future should cease to operate a group home there. And they came down to the decision that the best way to do that would be to have the ownership of the land through the town. So the town would, if town meeting authorizes, the town would accept ownership of this lot and would then lease back the home that will be developed on the lot by LifeWorks for use as a group home for 99-year renewable leases. So it's all but ownership as far as LifeWorks is concerned, and they're able to operate their group home as they would if they owned the lot. But the town has some control there, so that if LifeWorks ever ceases to operate a group home, the town can go out and find another operator to do the same, to keep those units on the subsidized housing inventory.
It's 5 units. Does that count as 5 units for?
It counts as 5 individual units. It's a 5-bedroom group home, so we have other group homes in town, and they're all counted in that manner.
Chris?
Same question as before. So I'd like to know what the real estate taxes are being collected on it, and will LifeWorks sign a pilot agreement? A payment in lieu of taxes?
I believe the taxes that are being calculated right now are for the 20-acre parcel as a whole. I don't know that the property has been reassessed as divided lots, so I don't think I could give you an answer on what the tax value of an individual lot is. But this is a single-family lot. There are 6 of them that are being created, so each of the other 5 will have a taxable value. This being owned by the town would not have a taxable value. LifeWorks is a nonprofit organization, so whether they owned it or the town owned it and leased it to them, it would be a tax-exempt property.
No, but LifeWorks can sign a pilot agreement. And
If they chose to, I imagine they could.
I would like them to. I don't want to lose the taxability of this
I
property
think-
that we're giving away.
I think there are a lot of cases where there are trade-offs, and we get 5 units in this facility, 5 units towards our affordable housing inventory, which is going to be far more expensive if we had a 40B come in. That would be a much greater impact on the schools. So, I mean, I think we have other group homes run by LifeWorks as well.
We do, by LifeWorks, by Charles River Associates.
We have
By the
other-
Mass Association for the Blind, none of which are covered by a pilot agreement at present.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that, that's something we'd really want to require.
No, but I think we should be transparent about it.
We
The
can.
town is losing tax revenue by giving away these lots, by accepting municipal ownership of these lots.
For this particular lot, it's currently owned by a developer and leased to LifeWorks. If the town is not interested in accepting it, it will be sold to LifeWorks and will be a tax exempt property, just like the other group homes in town are tax-exempt properties. If the town and the property owner negotiate a pilot agreement, that's a possibility, but you have to have willing partners in a pilot agreement. We have no way of making it mandatory for a property that the town does not own.
Anything else?
The next article is Article 6, and this is related to the potential disposition of the Obed Baker House. So this article and Article 7, which is a proposed potential rezoning of the land associated with the Obed Baker House, we have to beg your indulgence on these two articles. They are not in a form that can be fully explained at this time. We have put out a request for proposals to sell the Obed Baker House, to sell or lease the property. This is the fourth time we are doing this. We did it in 2014, 2017, we did it twice in 2018, and in each instance, there was either no takers or there were takers who backed out at the last minute. So we are trying yet again. We have had potential developers who've expressed interest and have asked us to put out an RFP and follow the process through. The timing of the RFP is such that proposals are due the end of February, so right before your first public hearing. Once the proposals come in and we know the nature of them, they would go to the Select Board, and the Select Board would determine whether any of the proposals are worth pursuing. If they choose one, that proposal becomes the designated proposal, and then they follow a process and determine if it's a suitable recommendation, whether they'll take it to town meeting or not, and if they are taking it to town meeting, whether it would, for the disposition, whether it would also require a rezoning. So currently, there are two parcels involved at the Obed Baker House. One is the smaller parcel that the Obed Baker House and the cemetery barn sit on, and that's zoned local business A. The other larger parcel next to that is zoned single residence C. Most uses of the Obed Baker we anticipate would require additional parking. Right now, the Obed Baker House has 5-lot parking area next to the house, between the house and the cemetery barn. Depending on what type of proposals come in, we envision they may need additional parking, and they may wish to put it on the other lot. The other lot has substantial wetlands, but there is also a dry, flat area that could be used for parking. We've put a very broad, open-ended RFP out that allows a developer to come back with any variety of proposals. And we're hoping that we get one that looks like it would be appropriate for the site and beneficial to the town. And if that's the case, then the Select Board will select that proposal, determine if zoning changes are necessary, and bring it back to discuss with you at your hearing. I can't say that there would be a fully baked proposal for your first hearing. It may be that we don't know all the details until the second hearing. And if the project never gets to the point where it's clear and concise and ready for approval, it will be withdrawn and considered at a future time. So this is one that because we don't always have more than one town meeting a year, and we have developers that are interested in this property now, and because the property has sat empty since it was moved to that site in 2002, and we've tried a number of times to sell it, I think we're at the point where it's a waste for it to continue to sit there, so we'd like to see what we can do with it. So we're trying one more time, and if we're not successful in finding a buyer that has an appropriate use this time, then I think we're going to have to look at going in a different direction. But having a property at such an important, visible section of our town sit empty for 18 years now, it just can't continue indefinitely. So I beg your indulgence to allow us to pursue the RFP, come back to you with all the information when we have it, and then either pursue the article or request withdrawal.
Can I ask a question about or traffic? So if something comes forward, and I think one of the things we've discussed in the past is the parking, the parking and the access in and out, and it's kind of crazy on that corner if you're coming out Dunkin' Donuts and people coming around. At what point will there be any discussion about that?
That would be in the review of the proposal by the Select Board. So the RFP is very flexible, but one thing that's made clear is that there is no ability to access Route 109 from the front of either of these two parcels. You could not go directly onto Route 109. If you put a parking area on the currently residentially zoned parcel, you would still have to go between the Obed Baker and the cemetery barn to the cemetery access road and come out at the place that you come out now, or propose something completely different, but you could not come out onto 109. That curvature in the road is simply not a safe place for an
Okay,
access.
so that won't be on
That
the
will not
table.
be a proposal,
Okay.
no.
Anything else?
I just wanted to say, anticipating your question, Chris, if we do get a for-profit that goes on this property, it would increase the tax base. Okay?
I'm going to ask a question, but thank you very much.
Just anticipating that.
Maybe it can compensate for the other two properties, too?
I can't say that, but it would be an increase in taxes for the board.
I see this project a lot like the Colburn School Building right next door here that, sat for a number of years vacant and deteriorating, was moved twice, first behind this building to allow for the construction, then moved to the new site once we found a developer. I'm hoping we have a similar situation where we find someone to put the building into very productive, useful, profitable use to the town that's appropriate to our character. So we're doing our best to invite proposals. If anyone's interested in submitting a proposal, please do. Check our town's procurement website, and we'd be happy to work with you.
Okay. That's it for questions. And then are the remaining all placeholders? Oh,
Thank you very much, Nora.
you're welcome.
Bless you.
One note, we're just trying to keep you all on your toes this year. Usually, in the past, we would reserve an article to accept a private road as a public road. This year, we haven't populated that article. There's a chance we'll take one of these miscellaneous articles and come back with that, so we're just going about it differently. But there is a chance we'll be doing that. We're just not ready to talk about it yet. So I wanted to let you know that. Other than that, that's a wrap on what we want to present to you.
Do we have any other questions for the select board? I guess we'll be seeing you again at some point.
Public
We were going to do public at the end.
So I should say.
Yes, if you could stay, that would be fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. And planning board? Oh, could you tell Brian, he's out in the hallway. No, one of them, they can get him. So we've got Brian Gorman and Deb Conan representing the planning board and their articles. And you had 9 articles on, and then I know at your meeting the other night, you decided to withdraw 4 of the articles. So,
That's right.
You're here to address the articles 1 through, planning board articles 1 through 5.
That's right.
Oh, okay. And, yeah, and I guess the select board voted to concur or to agree with you on the planning board articles, and they voted off those articles as well, so.
Okay.
So anyway, so.
Great. So the first zoning amendment is to regulate short-term rentals. So what we have here is a zoning bylaw amendment to include new definition and regulations for short-term rentals, amendments to the table of accessory uses, use regulations, and minimum time limitations for rentals. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to achieve is adding a definition for long-term, which currently doesn't exist. So that would be a number such as 30 consecutive days. Then adding one for short-term, so that would be less than 30 consecutive days. And then what the important aspect of this is to add text that shortened term that short-term rentals must be rented for a minimum of 5 consecutive days. So the purpose and intent is that Westwood currently has no definition or regulation of short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are known to have problems related to such as Board of Health, Fire Department, parking, among others. For example, other fire departments may challenge how many occupants are in a building in certain situations. So the applicability definition, so what we're looking at here is, this is a little bit redundant with my first slide, is a short-term rental would be defined as a housing unit that is rented for 5 or more days up to 29 days. The maximum number of unrelated occupants would be 3. That already exists in our bylaws, but I figured we'd include it here. And then what this means is that short-term rentals for less than 5 days would not be allowed. And no changes would occur for greater than or equal to 30-day rentals. So under the current zoning. And some of the considerations that we were looking at, but recently found to may not be applicable to these set of bylaws, is the registration requirement fees, the Board of Health inspection, and cleaning requirement. I've reached out to the Board of Health just to initiate conversations. But moving forward for this article, the presentation includes this, but this would be something for the future.
Okay, future, within this article or future?
Future town meeting, so future town meeting, so
Okay,
not.
all 3 of these issues?
Yeah, so this is something for consideration, but will likely not be moving forward with, because it's not included in the scope of what we wanted to.
Okay.
And I believe we were noted that it exists in a different bylaw section that is outside of the purview of planning board.
Okay, so I know there was some discussion at your meeting the other night about whether it was business bylaw or zoning bylaw.
Yeah, and I don't know what section it is. I thought that it could be applied here, but apparently it is not.
Okay. So I don't know if you heard, but we're having questions on each
Sure,
article.
yeah.
Howard?
If someone violates this, it's just the same as violating any other zoning regulation, with no specific penalty.
Penalties, we haven't talked about penalties, but that's a good question. Very good question.
Should have to put this in the taxes, but.
Just a couple of questions for you. Do you have any data on how many short-term rentals, long-term rentals actually take place in this town?
Yeah, so I've been keeping tabs on this over the last year, knowing that this was one of the topics that got brought up a year ago. So at any given time, there could be up to 10. Even I looked at Airbnb today before this meeting, and I noticed 4 or 5. So I see some constant units, but then I notice some unique units. So they come and go, and I think that's the nature of Airbnbs.
But that doesn't tell you how often they're being rented. Just how often they're
Yeah,
sold.
so during my review, I've noticed that there were like 3 consistent addresses. I don't have the addresses to give you tonight, but there's, and they're in different parts of town. So one is in the Islington area, the other one appears to be in the Milk Street area, and then the other one is up on High Street towards Hartford.
So we have 6,000 homes, and we've got maybe 5 short-term. So I'm not quite sure I understand why we're doing this. The other question I have is, what's the basis for 5 days? Where did that come from?
So the basis for 5 days is that if there was a family in Westwood that wanted to go on vacation, they would be able to rent their house for the week. Typically, people go on vacation for more than for a week. So the idea is that if you went on vacation, you could Airbnb your house, you could short-term rental your house for a full week, and that would be covered. Because that was one of the concerns. Is like, what you're telling me I can't rent it when I go on vacation? So this was to answer that question.
Airbnb also does rooms in people's houses, not necessarily the house, correct?
Both.
Well, I just don't see, unless you have data that's telling me that this is a real problem in town, if you have complaints from the health department, the fire department, raise issues. Just being honest with you, I
Yeah, so the question, George, is
Concern is-
at what number does it
My
become? Oh, sure, yeah.
concern is, one, the number's extremely low as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned. I'm nervous about your definitions. And I don't know whether short-term should be 5 days, 1 day, 7 days. I don't really know where that's come from. And also long-term, I think you have to have a lot more data, you know, telling me there's a problem in town and we're addressing it. I know big cities like Boston and the states have dealt with, they had, you know, a lot of problems and they were responding to a problem. I'm not sure I see the problem here.
Sure. Well, there'll be residents that will come to share their problems with you at upcoming public hearings.
I'm sure there will be, but I don't understand the basis of where the 5 days came from.
I just answered that. So the 5 days is an issue that got brought up by residents that said, what if I want to rent my house for while I'm on vacation?
Would this prohibit somebody from renting a room through Airbnb for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights?
Yes.
So you want to prevent basically Airbnb operating in this
For
town?
less than 5 days.
What have surrounding towns around here done, our local towns? Are there regulations they've put in place? We have comparative data.
There are, yes. So I didn't include it in this presentation, but I can have that for you. For this, it's more of a question, at what number does it become a problem? So it's trying to be proactive, and I've heard from residents who have dealt with this, and it can be distressing for them. But I'll let them share that with you when it's public hearing time.
Well, I think the data would be important too in terms of what other towns have done, what are the issues, maybe hearing from the health department, the fire department, the police department, has this been an issue, you know, in town that's bubbled up?
Yeah. Well, I know one resident I was speaking to last week said that they had made calls to the town inspector, and the answer that they received back was that there was nothing they can do about it because this doesn't exist in the bylaws. So
What purpose did they call the town inspector for? Like, was it a traffic issue, or it was just that they saw what they consider to be too many people
Yeah.
next door?
Yeah, good question. So cars in the street, and then they saw just new car after new car after new car.
Okay.
So then
because I kind of listening to some of the comments that were made, you can have that in any neighborhood with any next door neighbor, or it doesn't have to be an Airbnb. It can just be a neighbor issue. So I want to have a much clearer view as what is causing this.
Sure.
Because you're affecting people's property rights and, you know, everything that, and you're really affecting everybody, how they're dealing it. Somebody, you know, needs to be renting out a house.
Yeah, essentially, right now, somebody can buy a house and rent it out as a flop house. There's nothing stopping them from doing that under our current bylaws.
Okay, so want to change the time to not by the hour, I guess, to have it by the day.
No, I hear your sentiment.
So, you know.
That seemed to be a bit of a leap.
What's that?
Yeah,
To
exactly.
buy a house and it could become a flop house.
No, I know one of them was monetized for by the day. So it was, and they were keeping track of the cars. So, yeah, this is something for consideration. But I think when you hear from residents, I think that's where it becomes powerful for me.
Brian, I'm sure you may have 1 or 2 or 3 very upset residents who I now assume we're going to hear from. But I think the issue is, I think we have a responsibility to step back and say, this affects, I think as Barbara said, property rights of a lot of people. So are we dealing with a neighborhood issue, a complaint, and trying to use basically a nuclear weapon to solve it? And I just, you know,
It affects the property rights of everybody,
yeah, that's my whole point.
the whole town.
Yeah.
But this isn't a new concept. There are lots of towns are doing it. Boston's doing it. So obviously there are issues that are going on.
They've got other issues. The big cities have other issues. But, you know, if you look at other suburban communities, that's really I think the measuring stick that we should be looking at is what have other towns like Westwood been doing?
And
I
the big
agree.
cities have solved it by taxes. The resolution has been that they now, the hotel industry basically insisted that if you're gonna be an Airbnb, you basically have to pay the same taxes. They didn't stop Airbnb or rentals coming in. So,
Which is, Brian, my point I want to make, since raising taxes seems to be a theme tonight. And where there's no language currently to address or to tax people who choose to use their property for short-term rentals, this is an opportunity for that, so.
But I do think that that is a business, business article than a zoning article. I'm not sure that, to impose a
Yeah, it's a
tax
good,
on
it's a good question.
They could
It's a
be
good point.
intertwined.
I think Charlie Baker had addressed that earlier in the year, but I'll have that to share. Because you're right, it's a tax,
Currently no tax.
right.
A question perhaps that may be related. I'm curious about whether there is a limit on the number of unrelated persons who may be in a home in Westwood.
Yeah, so that exists already in the bylaws. I believe it's no more than 3 unrelated. The challenge there is regulating that. And one could challenge this, like how can you regulate this when it's being done online? But the ability, if you knew that if a neighbor, because some of this, the neighbors have to see something to report it. So on the Conservation Commission, they rely on residents to observe. You see a tree company going and cutting down stock. But at least if they allow for rentals of 1 day, then you can notify the town inspector, and then they can contact the owner.
That's incredibly intrusive. So if you have a guest overnight, somebody's going to come and knock on your door and say, is this a guest? Is this a paying resident? I'm like.
Well, what situation are you speaking to?
No, you're saying if you have somebody come in overnight and a neighbor reports on them, I'm like, we're not becoming Big Brother around here.
No, so are you speaking of a random house and you think that there's 3 unrelated people?
Well, you're saying that you're going to be reliant on neighbors to report it.
No, so what it would be is here's what happens. You drive by a house and you see that, and a neighbor will notice this. They'll notice a Tennessee plate, then they'll notice a Rhode Island plate, and then and it's new cars, and you notice that. So if somebody sees a trend, then they can call up the town inspector, and they also notice that it's on Airbnb. So it's not that hard to recognize that something is happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a situation where somebody
Yeah.
gets suspicious and calls up the
Yeah,
town
that's why I was beginning to
inspector. I think he would deal that with however he does.
I would just echo George's request for data, that it's truly problematic from a town services standpoint.
Yeah. I think that'd be hard to find, honestly.
I think it's important, though.
Well, because what happens is the things that people are looking for Airbnb for fire and safety inspection is locked doors, fire monitoring systems. So if you in the future requested them to register, then they would be able to do an inspection. But today, there's no requirement. So you could open up an Airbnb, and there's no requirements for the fire department to go in.
The data we were talking about, though, is first of all, the data on the number of short-term and long-term rentals that you think are taking place.
Yeah.
First of all, from what you've told us, that it seems to be a very, very small number. Number 2, what are other local towns doing? Is this even a problem? Or
Yeah, I have that. I've noted that question, so I'll have
and
that.
maybe even find out from the fire department, from the health department, is this a problem on their list?
You've made a statement here that they're known to have problems related to Board of Health and Fire Department. And I think what George is saying is we want evidence of
Yeah,
that.
so I'll show that.
I just said the police department is probably the most important one.
Yeah.
Their complaints about noise or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll have collected that information.
Anything else?
Yeah, just Googling this real quick. Second, Tara. It says some city and towns require that anybody choosing to participate in the Airbnb must register, must get a permit, obtain a license before they're able to do it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a precedent there, there's some things, and if that's where you're trying to get to, that's my guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's for tax purposes, Mike, for people that, whether you have a summer residence that you rent or what have you, I think that's the control for the state to make sure that they get their taxes for any rentals that are 30 days or less. And anything over 30 days is then exempt from the tax.
But it's also to monitor fire inspection, and then what they'll also, from a public health standpoint, is right now somebody can rent in perpetuity and not have to get a cleaning service. So some towns require cleaning services after X number of days.
So if I rent a house though in Westwood for a year, and I sign a lease to rent the house, nobody from the town comes in and does an inspection. It's between me and the owner of the home. Okay, so I'm just, the fire department doesn't come in. Now, if you sell a home, fire department will come in and make sure you've got smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors. But when I rent, if I decide to rent my home for 6 months or a year, it's between me and the person renting my home. Nobody comes in and checks on me.
So you made a comment that somebody could buy a house in Westwood and immediately turn it into, the term you use was flop house, but what I think you mean is a daily rental.
Exactly.
As far as I'm aware, you cannot operate a hotel in a single residence district.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the concerns.
So that would be, right now, you can't do that.
Yes, you can.
No, the bylaws don't allow you to operate a hotel in a single residence district. That's not an allowed use in a single residence district, is
It's a
it?
problem with the definition of hotel, perhaps.
Yeah, and Chris, I hear what you're saying.
I mean, it's a business, for one.
And that's what residents have. The first thing they say is, how can you do this? It's not a hotel, and I think it might come down to definition, so.
So the zoning issue here is making sure that people cannot operate basically what it is, essentially a hotel in a single residence district, or a motel. And there's another business aspect to it that Mike brought up in terms of revenue generation.
Yeah, agreed.
But there are other ways of attacking the business aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
Yeah, I made note of that, so thank you.
Okay, so that one, I think we've kind of beaten the horse there. That one, it obviously needs a lot of work to tighten it up, and the next time you're here, you're going to have language for us that it's pretty much, the language that we're going to have to work with, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have to move the car by midnight.
Next one.
So this is zoning amendment relative to Morrison Park and Field. So the purpose and intent is to amend the official zoning map to remove 300 Washington Street, Morrison Park and Field from the FMUOD, to see if the town will vote to remove the parcel known as Assessor's Map 23, Lot 216, Morrison Park, including basketball courts, baseball field, DPW facilities, snack shack, softball field, and parking lot totaling 3.06 acres from Section 9.5 FMUOD 6, and update official zoning map to reflect changes or take any other action thereon. So the underlying zoning of Morrison Park and Field is local business B. This article is proposing to remove the FMUOD zoning to update the official zoning map. So this is just some history on Morrison Park. So Morrison Park was zoned for decades under local business B. The FMUOD zoning was added to Morrison Park in 2014. So therefore, the current zoning is both local business B and FMUOD 6. Morrison Park is one of, then as far as more history is what it's used for, it's one of only a few regulation-sized Little League parks in the greater Boston area, and it's an official field that's used for Little League, World Series, and then you have the other areas there too, like the basketball courts. So what's the difference between the local business and FMUOD zoning? So in general, the FMUOD zoning is a zoning that includes housing, increased density, reduced setback requirements, and reduced parking requirements. That's what allowed for Islington to have the CVS and condos and things like that. The local business B zoning has no by right zoning, and it's less dense. So then the question is, why would you want to remove the FMUOD zoning from Morrison Park? So if you peel back the onion into history, it's unclear why the FMUOD zoning was added to Morrison Park. I've heard a couple different answers, but I don't know it, but it was added. And then if you remove the FMUOD zoning, there's no negative impact on Westwood. And when you remove the FMUOD from Morrison Park, it makes Morrison Park less attractive to developers. So the idea here is that the residents of Westwood want to maintain Morrison Park. So by removing that, it protects it a little bit more. It's less protected if it has the local business B and the FMUOD zoning. And what are the benefits of removing Morrison Park from FMUOD 6? So this maintains the Little League field. Even through the open space and recreation plan, we talk about the fact that there's a need for fields in town and the desire for open space. So essentially what this article is doing is going back to what the zoning was prior to 2014.
So what you didn't say is that it is town-owned. In order for anything to be developed there, it would have to be sold, which would have to go through town meeting is it 2/3?
Two-thirds vote.
3/4, I'm not sure. 2/3, thank you. And since everybody acknowledges that we need the space, I don't understand why we're going through this.
To me, this is it's a way of cleaning up the bylaw to go back to what it was. I don't think that it ever should have been added to the FMUOD.
Okay, can I ask a question of somebody who might have been involved in the initial zoning? Can I ask Nora Loughnane and get a microphone because there's been I've heard that it's been a mistake that it was done and all, and I'd just like to hear the background on it.
So when the FMUOD 6 district was formed, it was overlaying all of the local business B zoned property along Washington Street between the Norwood-Westwood line and Fairview Street. So it was everything that was zoned local business B. At that time, Morrison Park and the fire station were on a single lot known as 300 Washington Street. That lot was a local business B district that was along Washington Street. So it was within the district, and it was naturally included, just as all the other parcels in the area were included. I have no concerns with removing the FMUOD district overlay from this. As you said, the town owns it, and in order to do anything, in order to sell the property, the town would have to come back to town meeting for it. However, I do think it's worth pointing out that the local business B zoning allows the use of the property for commercial purposes. The only difference between FMUOD and local business B is the residential possibility that's allowed under FMUOD. It's not allowed under local business B. There is no difference in the density. There is no difference in the parking requirements. The planning board has the right to waive or reduce parking requirements under local business B, just as it does under FMUOD. The density is not increased. It's just a more flexible way of looking at things. There is no setback in local business B for the front of the property, and there is no setback in the FMUOD. It's all a way of looking at the property in a different way.
Does zoning on FMUOD require a special permit as opposed to local business B?
It does. If you choose to develop it as a flexible multiple use overlay district special permit property. However, any property that's within the local business B with an FMUOD overlay, so if we look at, I don't know, take the former concrete cutting property on Washington Street, that has local business B and it has an overlay. The property owner can develop it under either. They don't need a special permit to develop under local business B. That's simply a site plan review by the planning board, which cannot be denied. It can be conditioned, but it cannot be denied. If they want to include housing, or they want to have a coordinated development with their neighbors where they pull some properties together and are looking for greater flexibility, then they might want to do it under the FMUOD. And in order to do that, they'd require a special permit from the planning board. In this instance, the town owns the property. It's conceivable that if the select board chose to, they could lease the property. That's very unlikely to happen. This is a baseball field. My husband and planning board member Chris Paff and a whole bunch of other people worked very hard to raise a whole lot of money to develop this field, to make it a better Little League field that can continue indefinitely for the use of the children in town. I can't imagine anything changing, which is why I see no problem with taking the FMUOD off, but I don't want anyone to get the false impression that that's somehow protecting the lot or making it less developable. It is not. It's just as developable if the town chose to sell it or if the select board chose to lease it.
So then, so my question then was, does the FMUOD overlay provide an extra layer of protection for that lot, whereas someone would have to go and develop it with a special permit as opposed to just being allowed to develop it under local business B?
Yes and no. If it provides that greater level of protection if you want to develop it as a special permit project, but you still can always develop something under just the underlaying.
So it's really preventing housing to go in there.
Housing can only go in any FMUOD with planning board approval of a special permit. It's as simple as that. So, and if there's no FMUOD, it can't be considered. If there is FMUOD, it can be considered, but does not have to be granted.
And I don't know if everyone on the board knows what an FMUOD is.
Sorry, it's Flexible Multiple Use Overlay District. It's a section that we put into the bylaw beginning in 2011, right after the economic downturn, where we were trying to make things more predictable to commercial property owners and to encourage development that would be profitable and beneficial to our town. That's where it came from. Flexible doesn't mean it has to have housing. In fact, we currently have 7 FMUOD, Flexible Multiple Use Overlay Districts, and only 4 of them allow any portion of housing, and all of those are limited. The University Avenue FMUOD district, for instance, can have no more than 1/3 of the property area used for residential. The High Street and Washington Street can have no more than 50% of the total square area used for housing. And the FMUOD on the Glacier Drive can have no more than 50% if it's general family housing, but up to 100% if it's age-restricted housing. So every FMUOD district is specifically developed with the specific site in mind. They're all numbered and they all have different criteria, different uses that are allowed. We have other flexible multiple use overlay districts on Allied Drive, on Southwest Park, Walpole, per Wall Street. Those don't allow any housing, but they allow flexibility. They allow a developer to come to the planning board with a unique proposal that is specifically designed for the site, and that the planning board can determine whether it's beneficial or not before deciding whether to approve a special permit.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions from the board? Okay. We'll move on to the next one.
Okay, so the next article is the zoning amendment relative to prohibitive zoning bylaw. So the purpose and intent is to add language to make zoning bylaw a prohibitive bylaw for uses not mentioned. This would include adding language to specify that uses not specifically mentioned are prohibited or establish specific criteria for uses not mentioned. So when this was brought up as a concept, at that time, it wasn't brought to our attention that there is language within the bylaw that is exclusionary. So if you look at the fourth line down, No building, structure, or land shall be used for any purpose or in any manner other than is expressly permitted within the district in which such building, structures, or land is located. So I was happy to see that. I think that's great. So what that does is that allows the building inspector to make judgments, to look at the table of uses and such. What was looked at was to add in another sentence, which some may think is redundant, but I think it really puts the nail into the wood, where it states explicitly, any use not listed herein or otherwise permitted in a district shall be deemed as prohibited. So this is prohibitory language that you would see in other towns. So we do have language, which is great. This added sentence kind of brings us a little bit closer for protection.
Chris, go ahead.
2 weeks ago, I asked you whether you thought the intent was just to apply this to commercial uses. And reading 1.4, it doesn't appear to be so limited. So what you're saying now is this is going to apply to every parcel in the town, including residences.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get that answer for you. I apologize for not having that for you tonight.
Okay.
So can you repeat that again? So what you were looking at.
My concern is that this prohibited, this language here that you're inserting, saying you can't use your lot or anything that's not specifically allowed. 2 weeks ago, you thought that was only going to be applied to commercial uses.
Yeah, so I don't have that answer tonight.
Now,
I'll
it
have
looks
to.
like it's applying to every single lot in the town, including residences, and that's my concern. I don't know whether or not that's too big of a step to take.
Yeah, so let me get that answer for you, Chris.
And I was thinking it also goes back to the discussion we had about 10 minutes ago about using your house as a hotel. This would prevent that, specifically prevent that. I think it's specifically prevented anyway.
Yeah, so I've noted your question about the hotel, and I'm wondering if it comes down to the definition of hotel, but let me get that for you. So,
Okay.
so what you're saying is, could this actually prevent a home being used as a hotel? I'll look into that.
No, that's not the limit of my concern. My concern is that if I own a house as a single residence,
Yeah.
right, this might prevent me from doing something that everyone would think would obviously be able to be done. And if your intent is to prevent commercial uses from exceeding the bounds of what we think they should be doing, then that's fine. But when you spill over to residential lots, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot more residences in the town than there are commercial districts. That was pointed out earlier this evening. So we just want to make sure that we know the scope of this and what's applicable.
Okay.
George and then Mike.
Yeah, I think this is extremely restrictive, and if there are things you're concerned about that you don't want the town to do, I would rather have a discussion where we say, this is something we want to prevent, rather than having such broad language, which I think we talked about unintended consequences. Extremely concerned about that. Number two, I did ask last time that you give us some data in other towns, and I'm not surprised to see Weston, because I don't think Weston wants anything besides, $2 to $3 million homes in town. But Long Meadow's the same way. But unless you can show me that all of our neighboring towns are doing this, I just see, if you have something that you're concerned about, you don't want to see taking place in this town, let's have an open discussion about that, and let's deal with that issue. But this broad branded language is something that extremely concerns me. I think it's very much too restrictive, too broad, and I just don't, something I cannot support.
Howard? Oh, so I'm sorry. I already said Mike and then Howard.
defer to Howard.
I agree with you. It's redundant language. It's silly language. I don't understand why you're wasting our time or the selectmen's time, or we'll waste the public's time attending.
Well, you just said it's redundant, and what George is saying, it's too restrictive.
I disagree with George.
Yeah, so it's,
before.
yeah, so it's,
No, this something excludes is permitted within a specific area, okay? What you're doing here is any use not listed, okay, in our bylaws, unless we list it, it's automatically precluded. So I think there's a big difference, okay? I can't predict the future. There may be very legitimate things we need to do in particular districts, and I'd rather have us discuss at that point in time.
yeah, I mean, sometimes the issue with some of these items is that definitions can change, and some businesses do that to, so they change the name so that then it's not in the table of uses. So I hear both sides of it.
Ryan, there are businesses that didn't exist today, did not exist 10 years ago. There will be businesses that will exist 10 years from now none of us have ever thought of. But what I don't want to do is preclude those just by having a blanket. We didn't list them. We didn't say they're authorized. I don't know what to list.
Mike, where are you going to come? Are you agreeing with Howard or George?
I mean, Nora, I like to hear her opinion. As somebody who's responsible for, in your position, attracting business into town, does this inhibit that? Does it make your job harder? How do you see this?
I think this is not only unnecessary, but could cause problems down the line. I do agree with Howard that it's redundant, but I also agree with George that it could cause problems that we haven't thought about for new uses. Never. So here's my concern. We have language now that is not the clearest of all. It says if we don't say you can do it, you can't do it. What that does is it jumps it over to the building commissioner. The building commissioner reviews each and every proposed use and determines whether it fits within a general category in the use chart. If he determines it doesn't, he denies the use. At that point, the property owner is welcome to go to the zoning board to appeal that decision, and the zoning board has the final say. That's the procedure we use now, but that procedure is not spelled out in this bylaw. If there was to be any change, I recommend what the change would be, rather than putting language that's redundant, would be to put in a formal procedure that says, not that we don't allow any use, but clarify that section by saying, in the event that a use is not specifically listed, here's the procedure by which it could be considered for special permit, and allow it to go either first to the building commissioner, as we do in practice anyhow, or send it directly to the zoning board, but have a clear procedure everyone needs to follow. And what that does is it allows you an opportunity, if a use comes in that hadn't been thought of yesterday, that comes around, in the next couple of months, that's something brand new, there's a clear procedure for how it can be considered, compared to the uses we have, and either approved or denied. That's the type of bylaw change that we have been discussing for the past year that could be put into place. I don't think it's of immediate need, and I don't think a change should be made as an interim change that's neither effective nor, in my opinion, appropriate. I think this could cause problems.
Just out of curiosity, how does this fit in our comprehensive plan in trying to attract business, et cetera? Does this kind of try to shoot us in the foot a bit?
So I think it's could be unnecessarily limiting, but more likely could just lead to an appeal of a decision and a court deciding whether something's allowed or not. I think that we can either clarify what we have, or we can leave it alone until we have language that would better clarify it.
Cindy?
I just think that our bylaws should be promoting working together with people that want to come in and develop in Westwood, as opposed to off the bat prohibiting them from coming in.
Exactly, rather than throwing roadblocks.
It should be a collaborative effort as opposed to a roadblock.
Okay, Tom?
Did everybody on the planning board support this, or did anybody on the planning board not agree with it?
So this one was, I believe, was this 3-2?
It was.
Yes, this was 3-2. Yeah, and it was the same type of issues that I remember going on. Is it redundant? Is it too restrictive? So, and again, I don't think that it changed. This is not mind-blowing, I don't think. I am happy to see that we do have some restrictive language in there, and I think Nora's right as far as a having a stepwise approach to what happens when it goes to the inspector and then it gets kicked to the ZBA.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
I don't disagree that we should not close people off to the town, but I also think that the town should be proactive in having control over what it wants in town. I think a big problem came up last year with the asphalt company over the Norwood line. We don't want to be in that situation where someone's coming in and saying, hey, by right, we're putting it here and you're stuck. I think we should be able to have some flexibility, whether it's this language or what Nora proposed.
But unfortunately, that was in Norwood.
Correct, but I mean, I think we as the town should have control and then open a dialogue as opposed to someone coming by right and saying, oh, we're here.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? No, sorry, Steve. No, not yet. Okay. All right. Okay, we've got one more from you?
Yeah, so it's, so this is zoning amendment relative to firearms. So the purpose and intent, firearms/explosive sales and services are allowed by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals in 4 Westwood zoning districts: local business A, local business B, industrial, and highway business zones. The board wishes to evaluate where these uses are allowed. The board is considering removing the 2 local business districts that reside on High Street and Washington Street. Considering zoning amendments to the table of uses for firearms/explosive sales and services, section 41541. It's presently allowed by special permit from the ZBA in these 4 districts. So what I'm sharing with you here is this is what the current table shows. So it shows that it's allowed in local business A, B, highway business, and industrial.
For those of us that don't have the map memorized, could you describe what the highway business and industrial, what those areas are?
So the highway business, Nora, do you have the?
But we know what one local business B area is.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So,
I know.
local business A is the commercial districts on High Street. Local business B is the commercial districts on Washington Street.
Those are where he's talking.
Highway business is on Route 1, Providence Avenue, Highway, and part of Glacier Drive. And the industrial zone is along University Avenue.
Is that all of University Ave or just?
All of University Avenue is zoned for industrial use.
And so the last slide is just when we want to talk about the benefits. So the article was initiated following neighboring town concerns. So Dedham had an issue, although they had, at least we have the ZBA approval within our bylaws. But when we looked at it, what brought attention to it was the fact that it was in 4 different areas. And so it brought the question, should we look at these 4 areas and potentially reduce them? Now, it is true that the Attorney General may say no to this, but they also may be in favor of some of the concerns that you see on the newspaper regarding different issues. So this could get shot down at the Attorney General under review or not. But I believe that it's something that should be brought to them.
Brian, when we last time you spoke about Dedham, and they were approaching a resolution to their issue, how did that work out?
So I'm not familiar with what went on once they had the issue. Is Dave Atkins here?
Yes.
Dave, you know the history of this, right? Want to grab him?
So Dedham, there was a.
Could you identify yourself for everybody, please, Dave?
Yes.
It's on. It doesn't.
Okay.
identify in here, but it's on TV.
David Atkins, 783 High Street, member of the planning board. So, yeah, just reporting on Dedham, there was a proposed gun shop to open on Buzzy Street, I believe, and Dedham's bylaws did not define firearm sales at all. So the building inspector, basically, this is a retail use, and so gun shop is just another retail use. So it was allowed by right. They went through a process. They got the permit, and they've opened the store. So they're in business now. There were a lot of people who were upset about that and were protesting. And so they went to town meeting, and town meeting changed the bylaws to redefine to define firearms and to say that it would be allowed in their adult overlay district. However, basically what I know from the Globe on Sunday, I noticed this article. They said that the gun shop is open, and the town is going to try to think if they can retroactively apply the bylaw. But I don't, no opinion on that. But yeah, I was surprised because I had heard that it had been resolved by town meeting, and there's almost no opposition that they just changed the bylaws. But the fact is that the gun shop opened, and so Westwood, I actually went to that public hearing. It was a massive room full of people, and they feeling like, we went ahead and defined this, so we are covered, but we look at it and we're covered, but we could have a gun shop open on High Street or Washington Street. And so that's we were thinking that by just take it out of those areas, it's still allowed in other places. This is a small tweak to the bylaws, and it would head off the possibility of having to deal with that. And people can have their opinions on gun shops. It was mostly, I think, about the location. It was the idea that we're not trying to ban guns, but do we want a gun shop to open next to Roach Brothers or something, or do we want a gun shop to open across the street from the library? Wouldn't it be better in a more industrial area, highway business area, a place where there's lots of parking and less of the town center? So sorry, that's a long.
Okay. Could we ask? And you commented about the Attorney General. Could we ask from our town council his view on that?
Thank you. Steps a doozy. My understanding is town council is Dedham's bylaw change is under review at the Attorney General. Historically, the Attorney Generals in the state have taken the position that anywhere retail sales are allowed, gun sales need to be allowed. That was historically the view here. What the planning board, I believe, is trying to do now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they're trying to limit it to 2 places where they think it's more appropriate. It's true, we could pass this, and the Attorney General could say not so fast, but some of my conversations with people in Boston seem to think her office is more likely to let cities and towns limit gun sales to where they feel it's more appropriate. So I think this is worth the effort from my perspective.
So if we pass this and it got shot by Attorney General, we still have our underlying.
We still have the underlying protections.
It wouldn't be like they could open it
We
anyway.
don't go back to square one. Okay.
So we were already one step ahead of Dedham.
We were one step ahead of Dedham in the adult uses thing a long time ago as well. So if you as a group and the town as a whole sees fit, I think this is something worth trying.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, Howard.
Can we just limit it to the adult entertainment zone?
Yeah, if you want.
If this is legal.
There's already one on University Ave.
Where is our adult entertainment zone?
It's University Ave. Yeah.
I know, it just makes it simpler for people to understand. It's in the same spot with intent. Good to see you.
Yeah. Let's see down.
They were both of
Westwood's red light district.
Okay. Anything else? I think we're all set on that.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
And we've got the medical use.
So that was withdrawn.
Okay. So it's withdrawn, but the
selectmen
still have to vote on that. So,
That's right.
okay. And so there's
Township.
Yes.
We did vote at our meeting today to remove the 4
On the 4 articles, yes, but there's now saying the 5th article.
Planning board,
So your intention will be to, down the road, okay. So you're withdrawing it completely instead of coming up with, I know you had a proposal that you were working on, and so you can't come up with better language.
Within the time frame.
Within the timeframe, okay. I'm sure we'll see it again someday, since we,
Yes.
anyway, okay, I think that's it for that. Does anybody else on the committee have anything to ask? And then now I will open up to the public. If anybody wants to speak, we have a microphone either up on the board.
That gets to go over
Oh,
by Jim.
by
just
Jim.
for the cameras.
And
Yeah.
raise your hand and identify yourself. Yes, Mrs. Hyde.
Nancy Hyde. I just want to say that we only heard at the beginning of tonight that the medical use article was voted down by the planning board. We may take that up.
Okay.
But we haven't had a chance to respond, but we think it's an important action. So we have to talk with council and bring it back to the board.
Okay, and it would come under one of your placeholders then? Or-
I don't know that that's necessary, but we'll be reporting back.
Okay. So, yes. I assume this is on WEAC? Oh, no.
No, I was thinking about Maria Costantini, 15 Spelman Road. I was thinking about Morrison Field, and if you are rezoning it, why not rezone it to open space? I don't know. I'm not a city planner, but if we want to preserve it as a field, I just thought that it might be worth considering other options.
Actually, I was going to ask that. Why don't we have a zoning area that's recreation? And then we have a lot of things that would go under recreation.
Right now, the way the bylaw was crafted, it's never had a recreation zone. That could be something that we add in the future. That would require a much more detailed effort to rewrite our zoning map to include all recreation parcels throughout town, or to include just those that have permanently restricted open space on them. I think it's just a direction we haven't gone and that most towns don't go. They usually restrict uses to residential, non-residential uses. And open space can occur in any district. Recreation can occur in any district. It's an allowable use. But if that's something that the board wants to tackle in the future, that's a large undertaking, but not impossible.
Yes, Steve?
Steve Owner, 52 Glandor Road, associate member of the planning board. So I did speak to the planning board about the article on Morrison Field, and I'll just repeat what I said there, that I thought it was totally unnecessary, and because it didn't accomplish anything, there's no need for it. Very briefly, it's just a solution looking for a problem, and I did tell them it was just be a waste of time to bring it before the FinCom. We're just wasting your time. And I'm wasting your time right now, telling you it's a waste of time. So, on the other article about the prohibited uses, I want to stress, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion among the FinCom, there's no change there. It's in our zoning bylaw. It's always been that way. So if I could give you an example of something that happened, maybe you'd all understand it better. At one time, there's a woman on Canton Street who wanted to do adult daycare. She went to the building inspector, said, I want to do adult daycare center. He said, the zoning bylaw says you can do child daycare. It doesn't say adult daycare. So he said, prohibit it, as the zoning bylaw says. So I'm not sure whether she went to the ZBA, but if she did, she would be saying, sorry, it's prohibited there, because they can't make use variances. So the next thing she did was take it to the town meeting. She did a petition article. She actually could have gone to the planning board. We would have loved to have sponsored it. So the article came before town meeting, and there's some confusion about it, and I got to explain that, this is no big deal. if we can have adult daycare in residential district, if we have child daycare, we can certainly have adult daycare in a residential district. And that was a procedure, and that's a procedure that's done all the time. And there are businesses all the time that have to go and wait to go to town meeting to have some change to the bylaw so that they can do what they need to do. Most recently, Citizens Bank had to wait to get a TIF and had to wait for town meeting. So that's the only, I think the only problem here is the extra time it takes. If you find something new comes along, it's not really allowed, it's prohibited, and you ultimately have to go to town meeting. It's been done before many times. Sometimes the permitting of the planning board can take that amount of time anyway. So it's not a change. There's nothing to worry about. And again, the whole article I think is also unnecessary. Any questions?
So actually, can I ask a question of town council? I see you too. So if the change that's proposed, if in fact what that prohibitive zoning article shows, if we add that sentence, can you foresee any problems that are any pluses that are given, or?
I received this late this afternoon and had not had a chance to completely research it, but my first pass through looking at it, I believe that it is redundant in almost the line before it and that line itself that they're proposing is perhaps a difference without much of a distinction. So
it wouldn't add anything?
No, and the building commissioner is still your first line of defense. There's no changes in enforcement as I look at it.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Stephen Hart, 174 Pond Plain Road, and also current chair of WEAC. So I just want to speak briefly to the article co-sponsored by WEAC and the Select Board, and just point out that the genesis of that article was just encouraging conversation and collaboration around zero net energy construction. And I believe that it's just the fact that that article's been put out there is somewhat accomplished that as far as the school building project goes. So we've sort of accomplished one goal already in that small way, and we're looking to do the same thing with future municipal construction. So just to encourage the fact that we have that formally stated that that's the wishes of the town, and that encourages then collaboration and cooperation between the entities in town. Thank you.
Any questions since we have WEAC here? Chris, if you have anything? Okay.
No, I don't.
No, okay. Okay, anybody else? Yes?
Hi, Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. My question is, why wouldn't we want to protect Morrison Field from any development? We have a land trust committee in town buying up property on Summer Street and other affluent areas so that development cannot happen. Why wouldn't we want to do the same with Morrison Field? Maybe put it under a land trust, except for, I mean, they don't have to buy it. It's town-owned. Right? Why wouldn't we?
The land trust goes into conservation.
Right.
They wouldn't be using.
But this would be, green space. There isn't much land, especially in Islington area. Why wouldn't we do the same?
Well, land trust is a private organization. So.
Right, but this is to protect the land.
Nora looks like she has an answer. Do you? I'm sorry, not to put you on the spot.
I'll be happy to take this one, since I do know a little bit about this. So the proper procedure would be to put this into an Article 97, recreation use. Then even if the town wanted to get rid of it, if in case someone 20 years from now, 30 years from now, decides they want to get rid of it, to put it into Article 97 would take 2/3 of the legislature to be able to get rid of that property. That would be the proper way to go. Article 97, we can designate certain lands, and then it would be exempt from any development unless the legislature decided to approve it. That's really the way to go for that type instead of trying to remove it zoning, because in 20 years, someone else could rezone it.
Would Article 97 prohibit improvements to the field? Would you need?
No, as long as it remains recreational, that's the whole thing. And Article 97 takes recreational and open space and preserves it.
Okay, and that would have to be pursued by the Board of Selectmen, I
Correct.
presume.
Yes.
Anybody else? Yes, Don?
Good evening, Nada Milosavljevic, Fabrizio. Short-term rentals. It concerns me that, why do we have to wait until there's a problem? This is being presented by the planning board because there are residents that have problems with someone next door, where there's strangers coming in all the time. They have little children. They're afraid to let them out. We don't know who these people are, so I don't understand why we have to wait until there's a problem and why we can't address it before it becomes a problem. That's my first comment. My second comment, excuse me, Morrison Field. Because it's town-owned, I think residents are concerned that ultimately it's going to be sold the way that the ICC and this Islington redevelopment occurred a couple of years ago. So I think residents are concerned that because it's town-owned does not necessarily mean that it will disappear. I mean, that it won't disappear. I think the tennis courts are gone. You know, we had that municipal building put in, and residents were told that the tennis courts are coming back, and they're gone. So that's the concern. Just because something is town-owned doesn't necessarily mean that we have it in perpetuity. And prohibitive language, I was under, if someone can answer the question down the road, maybe at the next Finance Commission meeting, I thought that if we define a use in our zoning bylaw, then because we've defined that use, we open ourselves up to that use coming into town. And I thought that if we don't define a use, because it's not defined, and the language is saying if it's not defined, then it's prohibited, I'm hoping that I understand that correctly. I think I was under the understanding that if we define a use, then we're opening the door for that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes it, yeah. I don't know whether it's, whether planning board or town council.
And I don't either. And my last comment is, I don't understand why we need to know what neighboring towns are doing. We're Westwood, we're a community, and we're an individual community, and I don't see why we can't be pioneers and that we're always comparing ourselves to different towns in the surrounding area. And with respect to medical uses, I'm sure town council will be looking into this, because I would really like to understand, it was mentioned that the medical use proposed warrant article was voted on and withdrawn by the planning board, and that medical use is a zoning article, and I'd like to understand how the Board of Selectmen, or our select board, can override a planning board vote when zoning is under the purview of the planning board and not the Board of Selectmen. So when this all is said and done, I would really appreciate it if someone could explain that to me so that I can have an understanding of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Are you just fixing your hair, or do you want to speak?
So first, I just want to just address that last question about a zoning article. Zoning articles require a public hearing before the planning board, but a zoning article need not originate from the planning board. For instance, the Obed Baker zoning article, that's one of the articles that's on the warrant, comes from and is sponsored by the select board. The select board owns the warrant. The select board produces the warrant, they open it, they request input from other boards and committees, they accept the proposals from the planning board to put warrant articles on there, and for the planning board to sponsor those articles. The select board has the warrant and can also receive requests for those articles to be withdrawn. In the case of the most recent request that the planning board made tonight to withdraw the medical use article, I will make a request at the same time to the select board that they sponsor that article and keep it on the warrant. I believe that article is so important. We brought a medical use warrant article to town meeting in 2017. We did so because we strongly felt that we needed it, that the town is exposed by not having that article. It was approved in 2017, but then it was thrown out by the Attorney General's office on a technicality. We asked the planning board in 2019 to come forward with the article again. The planning board approved an article, but when it got to the public hearing, they heard from residents that they were not in favor of the article as it was crafted. The planning board vowed at that time to spend the coming year researching and developing an article that would be appropriate and that would hopefully pass town meeting, come before this board and be approved. Months went on and the planning board did not make any effort to do that. There was some discussion about writing an article, but it never got done. One planning board member over the last couple of weeks worked diligently to prepare an article and present it to the rest of the planning board at their meeting on the 21st. That article is actually in a PowerPoint presentation here, was prepared to be discussed with the board tonight. It's actually the only one of the 5 articles that's in a form that's ready for advertisement and actually has article language ready to go. The reason for that is because the article was written in 2017 and only required some tweaking. It's a very important article. I will request that the select board sponsor it and bring it back to you. We've remained exposed since 2017. The town is only becoming more and more popular for medical clinics, and I am most concerned about the potential for more nonprofit medical clinics, medical facilities coming into town and locating in our prime commercial areas. Right now, they could do that under the current bylaw. So I think it's important. I don't think it's something we can put off until the next town meeting, whether that's in the fall or the spring. So I will advocate strongly for the select board to take that article's sponsorship over and continue to have it on the warrant. I don't believe, we'll hear from town council when we get before the select board, I don't believe it needs to be a reserve article. I think they simply need to change the sponsorship of the article that's already on the warrant, which has been done in the past on other articles. So I think that's a very important article. We were prepared to discuss it with you tonight. The planning board voted 3-2 to withdraw that article, to request that the select board withdraw the article. So we'll wait to discuss it with you if the select board take it up.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else? Steve. And then this will be the last.
Yeah. Answering one of Nadia's questions, that if you define something, the planning board doesn't define something when they define it, and then they also put it in the use tables. So there'd be no reason not to do that. So anything defined, you then put it in the use tables. You tell exactly where it is used, and where it isn't, put it in the table. It's prohibited. So. That's the answer to our question.
Okay. All right. If we have nothing else, we're going to now discuss kind of a signing out. I said we'd discuss signing out the articles, responsibility for doing the write-up. So we've got a list of sort of all articles. Anyway, it's still to be determined, but, and I haven't gotten any feedback from people about which ones they want to do, so I'll just go through. 1 through 6 are kind of really standard boilerplate capital articles, and Jane and I will take care of those. So then we kind of go on. The ambulance, number 7, I'll take care of as well. Number 8, kind of if somebody's on the municipal or the education or maybe if one of them wants to take those. Chris? Okay.
For budget 8?
Yeah, budget 8. Okay, budget 9, which is those townwide recreation projects.
I'll take it.
Oh, I saw Howard. Tom? Okay. Yep, Tom.
She does.
Okay, the equipment borrowing, Howard raised his hand. Stabilization fund we'll take care of. OPEB, I was gonna say that would be Peter. We could get Peter Neville back, but, you know. The road improvement bond, that's gonna be, pardon? Meeting with Todd anyway, okay, so Howard will. The fire alarm regulations?
Who's meeting with the?
Yeah, who's meeting with the fire department? That's
That'll be
your team. Can I leave it with municipal and then somebody on your, somebody, whoever's doing fire for you guys? Okay. Okay, the WEAC. Yeah, it says probably going to be Howard, but it's municipal group. The WEAC, the non-binding referendum. We don't all jump up and down at once. Yeah, actually, schools, it kind of like falls, can I?
I'm not touching it.
I'll do it.
Okay, yeah, Diane. Okay, the lodge, whoever does, they do 4 and 5.
You mean the, how about the overnight permit restriction?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah,
I'll
I
take
missed
that one.
that.
You want overnight?
Yeah, that sounds like it's right up Cindy's alley.
I don't know what that means.
The lodge property,
Up your alley?
Why she's.
Peter's gonna do, Peter Lentz. Okay, Obed Baker. Oped.
6 and 7.
6 and 7?
I'll take those with the,
Okay, oh, yeah, that's right, you know, I made a note that I was gonna ask you to do those, yeah.
Okay.
and then the 5 planning boards, I'll break those up with Bill and Marty.
Okay, great, yeah, and who knows where they're gonna be. So that'll be, and then, you know, probably whatever is a placeholder, like if it's a road acceptance or something like that, that'll be very straightforward, and Jane and I will take care of that. All right. Can we put the minutes before you go?
Yeah, I will. And then I put it all together, and then I'll get it.
Okay, so we have minutes from December 3rd, please. And can I have a motion to accept? Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good.
I'm abstaining.
Oh,
Anybody else abstaining?
Cindy was abstaining. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
What happened to the housing presentation?
Because they had withdrawn the 2 housing articles. They were prepared to do it, but we decided not to do it because we weren't going to have any articles regarding housing.
The only thing I would say is, I think Cindy was something to ask for. The only thought I have is that at some point, we may have to deal with this issue once we get the census data and find out where we are.
Oh, we're definitely,
We put it on as a no.
believe me, I've obliged the next chair to both the housing and the OPEB are 2 things that have to go on. And Sarah Bouchard is all prepared to come in.
And Lou Rizzoli, who's the chairman.
Wait, I've got a motion, can I have a
motion to adjourn.
And a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.